Here we go. Good to see you on this Tuesday morning. 6 o'clock is the time. It is the 14th of November. Online, on your radio, on TV. This is Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster on GB News.
You're very welcome. Here's what's leading the news this morning. Braverman's out and David Cameron is back as new battle lines in the party are drawn. With the Prime Minister appearing to shun the right wing of the party, who speaks up for those people now? Olivia Utley will tell you.
Rishi Sunak has given his cabinet the reshuffle of all reshuffles, and some on his backbenches aren't too happy at all. Find out more with me just after 6.
And we have your views on Sunak's latest move to hold on to power.
It's a mistake. I think she speaks a lot of sense.
I think it was the right call because her views are a bit too much.
I think it's a bit unfair. I think she does speak for the British people, really.
So this morning, the heartbreaking pleas of Jamie Bulger's parents to not release one of his killers. John Venables is due to stand in front of a parole board behind closed doors later today.
And Storm Debbie still wreaking havoc across the south of England and is the latest storm to cause flooding, travel disruption, with the Met Office releasing a yellow weather warning. We'll keep you across what's running and what isn't.
And here's Alex Deakin with a preview of all the details.
Storm Debbie may have gone, but we're not done with the downpours or the gusty winds, or indeed the Met Office weather warnings. Join me later for a full forecast.
Oh, that was Alex Deakin with a preview of all the details, which is good. Previewing all the details in sport. Paul Coit, good morning to you.
Morning, I'll try my best, The All England club at Wimbledon are looking to expand, but the council's not happy about it. And it's Vegas, it's where the Grand Prix is going to be held at the weekend. It's probably the most exciting thing to happen in Vegas as far as motor racing is concerned since Elvis Presley won in Viva Las Vegas.
Oh.
Remember, Lucky Jackson, his name was.
Lucky Jackson?
Lucky Jackson. And he'd drive, and then he'd sing, and then he'd spin the wheel. That's what he used to do.
Wow, don't do that.
You know what? It's a bit too early to do Elvis, isn't it? Was it Elvis?
Then there's that song Rubbernecking, isn't there?
Rubbernecking?
Yeah, that's about stopping and looking at an accident.
Was it? Was that from Viva Las Vegas? I think
No.
it was from that. Okay,
No, I just made that. No,
it's a nice song,
you just had that song.
Yeah, it's very lovely.
Rubbernecking. You can join in if our discussions. You can rubberneck with us. See.
As you are.
See, GBviews at gbnews.com.
Too early, my mouth's hurting already.
At GBnews.
So 24 hours on, and we are looking at that cabinet reshuffle. To quote Olivia, of all reshuffles, new battle lines, though, have been drawn in the Conservative Party as the fallout from the reshuffle continues today.
OK, so Suella Braverman, she's history, or is she? And with her gone, a Tory civil war could brew. In just a few hours' time, Rishi Sunak's new cabinet will meet in Downing Street. Some familiar and surprising faces take their positions around the table.
Well, former Prime Minister David Cameron will take his seat as Foreign Secretary. James Cleverly moves over to the Home Office.
Suella Braverman was sacked following her controversial comments about migration and policing. Let's go to our political correspondent Olivia Utley at Westminster this morning. So here we are, the morning after the night before. How are things settling down today?
Well, absolutely. What a reshuffle. No one was expecting former Prime Minister David Cameron to make this very shock comeback today. As you say, it's now the morning after the night before. The dust is beginning to settle. On the whole, the Conservative MPs that I've spoken to are pretty happy about the return of David Cameron. He's pretty popular in the party generally, and the idea that Rishi Sunak had was that essentially he could pass over the brief of foreign affairs completely over to David Cameron. Previously, you've had foreign secretaries who sort of hold the role in name, but really when something happens, the Prime Minister has to go over to wherever the event is to have the international presence. David Cameron himself has that international presence, and he is on the whole, pretty popular with the party. That said, there are about 50 or 60 Conservative MPs who are very much attached to Suella Braverman and who said before she was sacked that if she was sacked, they would kick up a huge fuss. So I think we can expect to see some disquiet on the Conservative backbenches and possibly within the junior rungs of the cabinet as well. I think today what we'll be seeing in the cabinet is a sort of meet and greet, a sort of show and tell, if you like. And I think we'll see David Cameron really taking claim of his brief. He will very much be the one leading on Israel. He'll be the one leading on Ukraine. And Rishi Sunak, hopefully, will be able to focus on issues back here at home.
Except, of course, Cameron can't speak as Foreign Secretary in the Commons. He can do so in the Lords. How are they going to get round that?
Well, exactly. This is a pretty big issue, and one that the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, has already expressed his dissatisfaction about. There are a team of junior ministers led by Andrew Mitchell who will be able to respond to urgent questions in the House of Commons. But it's not an ideal situation. Can the Foreign Secretary really be scrutinised? He will be able to appear in front of the House of Commons Select Committee, which is there to sort of scrutinise what the Foreign Office Department is doing. He will be able to appear there, but he won't be able to appear in the House of Commons. Will it be okay just to have a team of junior ministers? Now, probably fine. But if something huge happens, if whatever's going on in Israel, takes off again and we're having huge amounts of debate over the UK's response, will it be okay just to have a junior minister there talking? Won't we want to see the Foreign Secretary? So I think that is going to be a big issue and something that Rishi Sunak will have to speak more about in the coming days and weeks.
There is precedent, so I'm sure they can look back on how it used to work, although I know there's so much more pressure to be visible in the modern era. But I do think it's interesting the way this has been covered in a lot of the right-wing press this morning. Who will speak up for the Red Wall Brexiteer backlash? But obviously the Prime Minister's made a political calculation here. He obviously thinks elections are won in the centre ground, and there is a rump within, perhaps you could say, the blue wall. He'll be really pleased to see the return of what I suppose a lot of people see as a sort of liberal, compassionate Conservative in David Cameron.
Well, exactly. I think this is a really interesting political calculation, and I think what it possibly indicates is that Rishi Sunak basically thinks he's already lost the red wall. Those seats which were fully Labour until just a few years ago, who lent their votes, as the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson put it, to the Conservatives in 2019 in order to get Brexit done. The polling suggests that those seats have already gone, really, and so do those last two bruising by-elections, one of them in one of those northern seats. Now it feels as though the battleground is in the south, between the Lib Dems in those sort of southwest seats and home county seats, and the Conservatives. And Rishi Sunak seems to have made the calculation that David Cameron will very much appeal to those possible Lib Dem swing voters and could help the Conservatives hold on to a number of those now really important seats, which probably just a few years ago would have been considered very safe Tory seats.
Olivia, more from Olivia throughout the programme. How will Lord Cameron, as he is now, find it working in Rishi Sunak's number 10? And why would a former Prime Minister want to go back to government?
Well, here's his former advisor, Philip Blond, speaking to GB News on our special coverage last night.
I wonder, what is the question to which David Cameron was the answer? You know, what is the party? The party must, in essence, be giving up on the Red Wall. It must be giving up on its majority in 2019 and decided to defend its seats in the home counties.
Still watch it. It's a GB News special. Christopher Hope, our political editor. It's there. It's available on the website gbnews.com.
Now, Westminster murmurs have suggested that the sacking of Suella Braverman was a bid to end a power struggle between the former Home Secretary and the Prime Minister.
Well, what is certain is that her controversial comments on migrants, pro-Palestinian marches and policing divided opinion and put her in the firing line of Rishi Sunak.
And we've been getting your views from her constituency of Fareham in Hampshire.
It's a mistake. I think she speaks a lot of sense, and I think she's speaking for what a lot of the British public are thinking.
I think she's quite viperous and underhand, but she's not stupid, and I think she's doing it for her own reasons, i.e. to have a go at the leadership.
It's been a bit premature, actually, considering what she stood for, being a Brexiteer, and the small boat situation, and the other things that she was involved with, and all the thing about, I believe she was right when she talks about all these protesters, that they are hate crime.
I think it was the right call because her views are a bit too much.
I think it's a bit unfair. I think she does speak for the British people, really.
It's just a ploy to get to be leader, probably of the opposition, when or if they lose the election. So I think she's just trying to provoke stuff, and I think some of the stuff she said is not nice, and I don't think she really believe in it. I think she's just playing to a certain crowd.
Well, it's always great to hear what you think. Keep those views coming in. gbviews at gbnews.uk. In other news,
the mother, of the murder victim, James Bulger, has begged the parole board overseeing the potential release of her son's killer, John Venables, not to set him free as a hearing takes place this week.
Let's bring in our reporter, Ray Addison. He will explain more.
Thanks, Eamonn and Isabel. Well, it was February the 12th, 1993, when 2-year-old James Bulger was snatched during a shopping trip to the Strand shopping centre in Merseyside. But 2 days later, his body is found by children on a railway line just 2 miles from the shopping centre. John Venables, who was 10 years old at the time when he and Robert Thompson murdered James, and after 8 years in jail, they were both freed on licence and given lifelong anonymity. But in 2017, John Venables was jailed again after child abuse images were found on his computer. Now, not only could Venables be released, but James's parents have been barred from attending the parole hearing. Instead, Ralph and Denise have issued impact statements begging the parole board to keep their son's killer behind bars. Of course, they're terrified that Venables will reoffend. In her plea to the parole board, James's mother, Denise, said, "Look into my eyes and see what I've had to deal with for 30 years, 3 decades of hell. Make the right decision for everyone and keep my son's killer behind bars." Now, during the parole hearing, the panel will look for any evidence of behavioural change. They're going to be questioning key witnesses, including probation officers, psychiatrists, and, if he's willing to give evidence, John Venables himself. And of course, if they decide that he poses a manageable risk to the public, he could be released before Christmas. Now, of course, it all comes as the Victims and Prisoners Bill is currently going through Parliament. It promises tougher measures aimed at strengthening the parole system and making public protection the top priority in deciding which prisoners are safe for release. It will also give ministers greater oversight and the power to overturn release decisions for the most serious offenders.
Let's concentrate now on the weather warnings which are in place right across the country. This is after Storm Debbie wreaked havoc yesterday. Heavy rain and winds will continue to batter the UK, with the Met Office warning of delays to train services.
Well, let's speak to the travel correspondent for The Independent, Simon Calder, who has an update for us this morning. Good to see you, Simon. It has been quite disruptive, hasn't it?
It was absolutely horrible today. Yesterday, if I can just give you an idea, we had, for instance, British Airways cancelling 50 flights. Today, there's another 28 cancellations in and out of London Heathrow, which is really quite a significant number. That's going to affect 5,000 or so people. We also had ferry cancellations across the Irish Sea, in the Western Isles of Scotland, and later on, some really rough conditions going across the Channel, particularly between Dover and Calais and Dunkirk. The weather is still pretty exciting in the Channel, but it's the railways where you are seeing really serious problems. If we can begin in Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, between Leeds and Wakefield Westgate, too early in the morning. The lines came down, the overhead power lines came down yesterday because of high winds. Those have been worked on overnight, but there are still problems in place. So if you are travelling on this really key route, and it's going to affect people on northern trains, on LNER and on cross-country trains between Leeds and Wakefield, then prepare for delays. And I'm afraid we're seeing them actually mostly due to overrunning engineering works on some other really important lines. Notably, well, Britain's busiest railway station is London Waterloo, and the lines that approach from Wimbledon and Surbiton, so carrying the vast majority of trains normally, they're blocked at the moment because of overrunning engineering works. That means certainly tens of thousands of people are going to face problems trying to commute. And we're also seeing the same problem between Bracknell and Wokingham, and in the north of England between Barrow and Workington. So it's a question of good luck, everybody.
I appreciate that very comprehensive update. Thank you very much indeed. Simon Calder, thank you. Passengers between Leeds and London, we should say, are advised to travel via York. Rail replacement buses are running between Leeds and Doncaster, but journeys are likely to be extended by an hour. I think it's settled for that. That was all that's going to affect you. Right, 60 minutes past 6 o'clock.
You are tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. Here's a reminder of our top stories this morning.
Suella Braverman is out and David Cameron is back as new battle lines in the party are drawn.
With the Prime Minister chairing his first new cabinet meeting with his new team later this morning.
And the heartbreaking pleas of Jamie Bulger's parents to not release one of his killers, John Venables, is due to stand in front of a parole board behind closed doors later today.
And Storm Debbie is continuing to wreak havoc across the UK, the latest storm to cause flooding and travel disruption to planes and trains. And the Met Office releasing another yellow weather warning this morning. Let's get the latest update now with Alex Deakin.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Debbie may have cleared away, but there's still going to be plenty of downpours around today and gusty winds, particularly already across the southwest of England. Narrow band of very heavy rain is working across southern counties of England. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, flashes of lightning, rumbles of thunder and blustery wind. The Met Office do have a yellow warning in place for those thundery showers. Elsewhere, there'll be quite a few showers through the day, but some sunny spells over the Midlands, Wales, parts of East Anglia as well. In the sunshine, we might squeak into the teens, but further north, lots of showers and lots of cloud, feeling fairly chilly. Temperatures 9 to 11 Celsius at best. More showers to come this evening as well for central Scotland, feeding into Northern Ireland. Frequent heavy showers here and across northern England. Further south, well, a few, particularly in the southwest, but many places will be dry and largely clear as well. Some clearer skies and lighter winds in northern Scotland could allow temperatures to get down to freezing, but for most will be in single figures, 6 to 8 Celsius in most towns and cities. Bit of a north-south split then to start tomorrow. There'll be showers across the north of Northern Ireland, feeding into northern England, central and southern Scotland. Northern Scotland seeing a mostly dry and fine day, and much of the south actually having sunny spells and not too many showers through Wednesday. Decent chance of a dry day here. Still on the cool side for most though, 7 to 9 across the north, 10 to 13 further south.
Well, hopefully the weather will be decent for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. So it happens this weekend. It's underway.
Or is it the sunrise? That's all I can see.
Wow. And that thing's got a name, the sphere or the orb or something. You two have performed in that. Paul Coit is not there, but he's here, and he'll tell us what it's going to be like coming up next.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is time to go through all the latest sports news. Paul Coit is in the studio with us. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to apologise firstly about my Elvis Presley impression.
I thought it was very entertaining.
Was it uncalled for at that time of the morning?
It was a bit distressing, mildly disturbing, but highly entertaining.
Was it because you thought the King was alive and with you right now?
No,
is that what you were thinking?
because you were twitching like a lunatic.
OK, fine. Might have
Anne Margaret was in that film as well.
Anne Margaret was so he was a busboy in Viva Las Vegas, and his name was Lucky Jackson, and he was also a motor racing driver as well. And she was in a talent competition against Elvis to win money so he could get his racing car going again and then to win the Grand Prix.
He got her going.
He absolutely did.
Had an affair.
That's absolutely
She's
true.
still alive.
Yeah.
Today.
Yes.
But,
how do you know all that?
How do you know all that? Because I'm an Elvis fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's got a great way of dancing. She's
Yeah, I was just, come on, everybody, and turn your head to the left, and they would dance together. It was fantastic. There I go again. There I go again. Should we start with Vegas? What's going on in Vegas? I think that'd probably be a good idea because the Las Vegas Grand Prix happens at the weekend. Now, you'd think this would be brilliant and everybody would be happy about it, but apparently, people are not so happy. This huge disruption to the city. The track's being built, it goes right through the middle of the city. So they're trying to make this huge spectacle. They've had to repave the roads, so you can imagine what the disruption's like. There's bridges going over as well, which are being closed. And the last time they actually did try it was 40 years ago, and it was in Caesar's Palace car park. I think it probably looked a bit more glamorous than it sounds. But the whole thing kicks off at the weekend, and tickets aren't really selling.
Oh, no, really?
I know, you'd think it would be more successful because a year ago, everybody seemed up for it.
They prefer a NASCAR race in the States, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But anyway, it's Drive to Survive has been extremely popular in the States. This is the Netflix F1 documentary. So they thought, we'll bring it to Vegas. Everybody's going to love it. But they close it, even the show. So Rod Stewart's show is going to be closed on Thursday, Friday and Saturday because they don't want to compete against the Grand Prix.
Well, he'll be there. He loves a bit of Formula One.
Oh, yeah. Well, he loves a bit of sport.
But does it mean if they're not really selling tickets, do you reckon we could get some,
cheap ones?
Yeah, should we hop on a flight to Vegas and...
That wouldn't be a bad idea. Wouldn't be a bad idea.
Off.
Well, they've given tickets, though, to locals.
Have they?
To try and keep them happy.
What, like Adele?
Well, yeah, like...
Britney?
Does she class... I don't know whether she classes as local.
Residency, so technically...
She could probably afford the $800 tickets because the tickets they've given to all the residents are only for the Thursday practice anyway. Oh. So they're not very happy about it. And the other thing they're going to do is they're going to have a challenge because you've got Drive to Survive and you've got the golf TV show as well, which is on Netflix. Combine them and they're going to have racing drivers and golfers play against each other, and it's going to be live on the TV, like anybody cares about.
Like Netflix
gonna set my soul on fire.
Got a whole lot of money that's ready to burn, so put your...
So get those stakes up higher. A whole lot of money.
Lucky Jackson.
Viva
Las Vegas. You know what? It's a great film.
Anyway.
If anything else, you've got to watch Viva Las Vegas.
Nigel Farage will be viving in the jungle now because that's where he's going to go in an attempt to show people how cuddly he is.
Yeah.
And so
I love that he's finally confirmed. I mean, he touched down in Australia. We still weren't sure. Of course he's going in.
Do you know how many times they've asked me to go there?
Yeah.
What?
I bet they have they?
Yeah.
There's not a chance.
Did you nearly
making that up?
Well, I know. Just you know, I'm just reaffirming the fact that you have been. So, did you ever come close?
I went and commentated on the backup show. They had a second show on ITV2.
Sure.
And I went out for a week and commentated on that. And I had to eat some eyeballs while I was there, which wasn't very nice.
I'd rather eat eyeballs than cheese, though. I've got to tell you. I would.
Anyway, we're going to be talking about that.
It's the you know, lying down with rats and cockroaches and snakes and putting your.
Oh, Nigel's used to that sort of thing.
Very good. Yeah, maybe he is.
Do you know that plank, walking the plank? You know, the top of the apartment block.
Oh yeah, over the
tower
block.
That.
Yeah.
Don't like that.
Nigel's
But anyway,
gonna have a
more of all of this in Headline Makers, and we'll be talking about that next.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Front pages of the papers, they look like this on this Tuesday morning. Daily Mail, first of all.
Yes, they are reporting that Rishi Sunak gambled yesterday on his big decision to have a reshuffle in the hopes of restoring faith in the Tory party. Headline there, Rishi's big throw of the dice.
Guardian, David Cameron's shock return after becoming the new Foreign Secretary. Yesterday, Cameron's shock return in high-stakes reshuffle.
The Eye is reporting that we've gone back to the future after Rishi Sunak's gamble on bringing David Cameron back as his right-hand man.
Daily Mirror reports that it's the same old Tories as we go back to where we began with David Cameron returning.
And then we have the Daily Star with the only front page that isn't about David Cameron, and they're reporting that there's a rise of the slaphead. 88% of women find bald men sexy.
Oh, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Do you believe that, Claire?
It's a very high percentage, and it depends on which bald men we're talking about.
Well, Norman's not bald.
You have to believe it, don't you, really, as you get older?
They say that being bald is a solar panel for being a sex machine. That's what I've been told.
Well, they would say that, but there we go. But actually, there's so many men just all look the same, isn't there? They just got that shaved head look, and that's it. Norman, you're not tempted but to shave the top bit off?
No, I've been. There's a photograph of me when I was at university, when I was 18 years old, taken with me being held by 3 mates and eating a banana. It's a rather bizarre photograph, but it's held. The photograph's taken from the back, and I noticed at that point I was at the beginning of a bald patch when I was 18. So it's taken a very long time to get to where I've got to.
OK. Right. So there you just heard. Norman Baker and with Norman Baroness Claire Fox. So, Norman, where do you want to start?
Well, he's your old boss, isn't he?
He's my old boss.
Back in the top job?
Yes, he is.
Second in command?
Yes, he was a Prime Minister when I was a member of the ministerial team at the Department for Transport and the Home Office. David Cameron and I never really got on very well, largely because I reported him in opposition for misusing his parliamentary office for fundraising for the Tory party, and he had to apologise to the House of Commons for it. So he never quite forgave me. He does bear grudges, David, and can be rather petulant. Having said that, I think it's a good appointment because clearly the world is a very unstable place at the moment. Having somebody from Britain who is recognised on the world stage and is got some credibility and some bottom, if you like, is a good idea. And certainly he'd be much better known than, no disrespect to James Cleverly, but James Cleverly was a new guy on the block. Cameron's been there, knows the people, and I think he'll be quite calm and sensible Foreign Secretary. So I think that's a good appointment. And for the Tories, it makes them look a bit more in the centre, a bit more normal than they were doing.
Apparently, the Foreign Office were in absolute celebrations, really, really thrilled. Diplomats dream to have somebody of his clout as Foreign Secretary. As you say, no disrespect to James Cleverly. But there is disquiet in the right of the party, to put it mildly. Jacob Rees-Mogg saying that this is giving votes to the Reform Party. At least one letter of no confidence has gone in. Claire, what did you make of it all?
So there's a couple of different aspects to it. The fact that people are saying somebody of his clout would indicate that we've got a Conservative parliamentary party that's got no one in it. That you have to bring somebody back in that way would indicate, well, what's wrong?
Fair enough.
It is fair enough, but what I'm saying is it's a real admission of, oh, God, we've got no one who anyone takes any notice of. Secondly, we should remind ourselves that David Cameron's record on foreign policy, I mean, the debacle of Libya, before we go anywhere, I mean, by the way, in the middle of a Middle East crisis at the moment, the Libya situation led to chaos in that country. Everybody thinks it was an act of looking back on it.
What's the Libya? What was the
He basically went in and kind of just basically arbitrarily decided to destabilise Libya, bomb it into smithereens and basically bring about tribal warfare as a consequence.
He toppled Gaddafi, and then a lot of people say that the migrant crisis we face is as a result of the lawlessness that we see in Libya.
But it was also done slightly on a whim. One of his big foreign policy issues was obviously to go around Europe and ask them to change, if you remember, the EU constitution so that the UK had a better one, failed to do that, then came back and thought, oh, we'll have a referendum, I'm going to win this, watch this space, behaved as though he's going to win it all the way through, and lost. So, his foreign policy, the idea that he's a big beast on the foreign policy front is a big beast of not successful.
Are you suggesting then, Claire, that Rishi Sunak has appointed him not for his Foreign Office clout, but because of his electoral abilities at home, and has almost given up on the red wall, but decided, actually, rather than handing votes to the Liberal Democrats in the blue wall, we'll get somebody in who did, successfully win in a coalition government and then on his own in 2015.
I do also want to object to this notion that this is saving the Conservative Party swinging to the right, because actually it's a slap in the face for red wall voters, many of whom moved from Labour to vote for Boris Johnson in 2019. And a lot of that was to do with feeling as though the only way that they could get the Brexit that they voted for was to go with somebody who was a Brexiteer. Now, this is them saying David Cameron coming back is a real, kind of back to the, the man who a lot of people will associate, as I said, with being the major force in Remain. The second thing is, it coincides with Suella Braverman going, right? And people will say, oh, she's the right, but actually, I don't think it's as simple as that. She represented certainly a straight talking, sometimes in a way that I found, like everybody else, too much. But nonetheless, in relation to the recent demonstrations and the small boats crisis, she was considered to be somebody who was prepared to stick her neck out and say it as it was.
Where's she going to be sticking that neck out next, Norman?
Well, she's clearly not going to be silent, and she said she'll have more to say. I imagine that what she might do, because it's normal in parliamentary terms for someone in a senior office to request this, to ask the Speaker to make a personal statement, which she might do in the Commons. And no doubt she's saving her incendiary comments for that. You know, in terms of her record, I have to say that she seems to me to have failed on every front. I mean, there's nothing she's actually achieved in the Home Office apart from stirring up disquiet and, dare I say, hatred on some fronts. And whatever you think of her policies, the way she described them was simply unacceptable. You know, talking about homelessness being a lifestyle choice, when some of the people I know on the streets are ex-servicemen, for example, who've had a really rough time and come back with PTSD from their time overseas. I mean, it really was clumsy to do that. And also, when she crossed the line last week and started effectively giving operational instructions to the police, that's a really dangerous thing to do in a democracy for a politician to do that.
Although it is also the case, by the way, that the police had said, we can't do any of this because we haven't got the laws, we haven't got the authority to do it, which in some ways you could say they were looking for a lead. I think that actually the intervention around the police and the marches was one which was quite popular with people, because the double standards in policing were noted by many people in the public. The rise of anti-Semitism in such a gross fashion on the streets, the fact that the police appeared to not be taking that into hand, I think was an important contribution from a leading politician. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak was having an AI summit. He appeared to have no interest whatsoever in what was a major issue taking place on the streets of the UK. And so I think in that sense, this idea that she whipped up hate after we'd had 4 weeks of hate, straight before, by the way, Israel did anything in Gaza, there were people out celebrating and organising demonstrations against Israel.
On the topic, though, when she started talking about the police.
But she's the Home Secretary.
The pro-Palestine and the ceasefire marches, hate marches.
Yes, but
isn't it to suggest that everybody that was on these marches was in some way anti-Semitic?
No, but the problem is that the impact of the marches has been that there is a huge amount of hate against Israel in particular and Jews specifically.
I just don't accept that. I mean, the march went off for the number of people involved, 300,000 or whatever it was, hugely peacefully. There were hardly any problems on that march. The problems on that day largely came, as you may know, from the English Defence League and people on the far right who invaded the cenotaph.
But what people think is acceptable at the moment is a very large march. Most of the people on it, no doubt about it, want a ceasefire, as though that's feasible. Don't call for Hamas to release hostages. I disagree with them, but it's not about violence. No. However, a substantial minority are chanting slogans which are anti-Semitic, are holding up signs that are anti-Semitic, and the people who are the kind of peaceniks walking alongside them don't do anything about it. Now, I've been on every demo since, you know, time immemorial, right? I'm one of those lefty demo goers, right? And I have been on marches where people have chanted anti-Semitic slogans in the past, and I've shouted at them and had a go at them. If I was regularly walking on a demonstration, by the way, next to, say, those EDL guys, and they were shouting racist slogans and had racist... Do you think I'd keep going back every week? Or do you think I'd say, oh, isn't it lovely having those next to me, right? No, I wouldn't. I'd be worried about it. So I think what's happened is we are normalising the racism aimed at Jews, whereas when we see a few racist thugs from the EDL, everybody feels, oh, it's like back to normal. Those white football working class blokes, we know they're all racist. Well, you see different people actually holding racist slogans. And we saw it even in Victoria Station. People were just going, you know, kill the Jews, get rid of the Jews. Somebody going on a bus saying, are you a Jew? These kids have somehow been, and by the way, often not radical Islamism is one problem, and then we've got identity politics as well, where they're routinely told that white privilege at the top of that pyramid are Jews, and at the bottom are the kind of eternal victims, the Palestinians. And I support Palestinian self-determination. So this is basically from a position of recognising something has changed, and we've seen ugly anti-Semitism. I'm simply saying that Suella Braverman's intervention, when she called it a hate march, wasn't exactly completely far from wrong. And I don't think she was the reason why we saw hatred on the streets.
OK.
Your views very welcome.
Yeah.
gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at gbnews.
Can we talk about sperm and egg donation? I think this is a really interesting story. It's inside The Guardian. It's not on one of the front pages. But this is about losing the right to anonymity for people who do donate. And I wonder, will that have implications for people who come forward? And whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, Norman?
I think it mustn't be retrospective. I'm not quite clear whether it's meant to be retrospective, because people have given sperm on the basis it was anonymous, and therefore, they've got an entitlement to expect the rules to be maintained for them. Going forward, then clearly people go into this with open eyes if the rules are going to change. I mean, on the one hand, people who give sperm don't necessarily want their identity to be known. On the other hand, you'll have children up and down the country wanting to know who their parents are. And I think probably on balance, the second of those is a more important one.
Although quite often people who donate sperm father many children. And does that open the door for
it does.
issues?
It does.
Will it deter people, therefore? From...
I know, but that's what I think. I think IVF has been such a fantastic step forward for those who need it. And it's very important that you have sperm donors who donate, not to put too fine a point on it, a lot of sperm, right? Because IVF doesn't always work the first time, so you need a lot more sperm than you're going to end up with babies. The idea that somebody who's prepared to donate that sperm could potentially be, the father of 25 children dotted around the place. They're not donating their sperm so that they can be fathers.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
And I do think myself that the anonymity rule is hugely important in retaining this. I think a lot of people will now be put off.
But obviously this has come from a generation of kids who've maybe come up through IVF who've gone, well, hang on a minute, I want to know what hereditary genes I might, or problems I might have, or there's an identity crisis. There's a call from
the identity,
which you can also sympathise with.
But the identity crisis of saying I want to know who my father is when it's a sperm donor, is not going to be resolved by meeting the sperm donor. The genetic DNA information could well be stored for them. That's different. But actually saying, I really want to meet up with Nigel to see what he's like.
Isn't it, as a human, to want to make connections with your parents?
I think myself that this is a disaster.
Talking about meeting up with Nigel.
Different one.
That's a good link, Eamonn.
Norman, you could see you could be a contender in that jungle. Somebody like yourself, they like a politician in there. What do you think about Nigel Farage? Nigel Farage, he's calculated this. He hasn't done this on a whim. I don't think he needs the money. So what about his calculation, going into the jungle to make himself more popular, to let younger voters see that he's not as bad as he is often described?
Well, that's one explanation. Another is he does want the money. He may not need it. And the third explanation is perhaps he does publicity, likes to be in the news, and he likes himself on television. It may be one of those three things, or a combination of all of those. I mean, I think the whole programme is a little bit distasteful, to be perfectly frank with you. I don't really watch it. And I think
it raises money for awareness of dyslexia.
Yes, yeah.
It's very...
But that's not why he's not on the programme, is it? He's not gone there for that particular reason. And the idea of eating various bits of stuff out of the Australian backwoods is not something that I find attractive. No, I mean, I think he's there. He'll make a noise. He will be the focus of attention if he goes on it.
I think. Let's be honest.
And he'll be on the news a lot.
It's very high risk, this.
Do you think?
I mean, so I do watch I'm a Celeb, right? I mean, I'm not saying diligently, but I watch it. Actually, I was put off when, what's his name went in? Matt Hancock went in. I mean, that actually stopped me watching it for a period. But anyway, the thing that I think is that Nigel Farage wants to be taken seriously as a politician, has become taken more seriously in many ways recently, and there is a danger of going into this situation and being humiliated and not taken seriously. I don't know how serious it makes you look. I also think this idea that this is the way to talk to young people about politics is a bit odd.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't know if he's ever watched it, but nobody sits around talking about politics. And that's the point that we were making about Matt Hancock. He said he was going in to raise awareness of dyslexia or and of course no conversation was had apart from one sort of rather PR
well, we don't know.
bit.
They might have edited it out.
No,
who knows?
He might have been talking about it endlessly, but it was never shown. And in view of the fact we're talking about watching it, that even if Nigel does go in and talk about politics, they're likely to cut out that bit.
I think they might not cut that bit out, but I suspect they will have chosen very carefully, the ITV executives, somebody who they think will have a row with him.
Exactly.
And I think that's where more of the
danger
comes in.
That's also...
I mean, he's very, very well practiced at dealing with argumentative, perhaps unpleasant people coming up to him in the street, handling that.
I could be wrong, by the way, and he could be a huge. He might be a huge popular cultural figure by the time it's all over. I'm just saying.
I think there's a chance.
There is a danger. Let's just remember George Galloway and his cat.
Meow. You're right there. 6:45 is the time. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening news-wise.
And Suella Braverman is out. David Cameron is back as new battle lines in the Conservative Party have been drawn. The Prime Minister will be holding his first cabinet meeting this morning with his new team.
We have your views on Rishi Sunak's latest move to hold on to power.
It's a mistake. I think she speaks a lot of sense.
I think it was the right call because her views are a bit too much.
I think it's a bit unfair. I think she does speak for the British people, really.
The mother of murder victim James Bulger pleads with the parole board to reject his bid for freedom. John Venable's hearing is set to take place later today.
And Storm Debbie is continuing to wreak havoc across the UK, and it's the latest storm to cause flooding and travel disruption for planes and trains. The Met Office have released a further yellow weather warning. We were talking about AI summits and so forth, Norman. There's an AI story in the Mail referenced in page 15. AI could tackle avoidable heart attack deaths, according to a new study, which sounds great.
It does sound great, and there's no doubt there's going to be benefits from AI. We've had some stories dripping through the papers in the last month or so demonstrating that, and the ability to provide health benefits in particular has been the focus of attention. There's also been the stories about AI being, a threat to mankind and whether or not it will take over the world and eliminate human beings at some point in some sort of grotesque future. So I don't know. I think both of those are potentially true. But let's make sure, if possible, like with any development, actually, even like nuclear power, there's elements which are good and there's elements which are bad. And the skill, really, if the human beings have got the skill, is to make sure that we maximise the benefits and minimise the disbenefits.
Yes, well, that seems the obvious thing to do, but are we doing it? I mean, do you feel comforted by this summit? We had Elon Musk saying, there are good, bad, sort of 60-40, he thought was the ratio.
Yes.
But the trouble was the 40% bad had the sort of potential to be exponentially bad.
That's right.
I think there's a danger here of overdoing it when we come to the apocalyptic conversation about what AI could do.
But it's the experts that are saying it, so you have to listen to experts, don't we?
It depends what you mean by the experts. I mean, some of them are kind of the big tech experts, and they seem to be having an existential crisis about it. But I think that, if anything, it underlines that we've lost faith in humanity, because what it tends to happen is that we say, oh, God, they're going to come and take over from humans. They're going to be more human than human. I think this story is a nice antidote to that, because it's very important to recognise that these new technological developments are going to lead to wonderful breakthroughs, and this cancer one is one of them.
Claire, we have a wonderful breakthrough in terms of government now. We're going to go to Richard Holden MP, who's Conservative Party chairman, the newly appointed chairman of the Conservative Party. Congratulations to you all on that, Richard Holden.
Thanks, Eamonn.
So, Richard, tell me, what sort of party have you got under you now that the dust is beginning to settle, or is it beginning to settle over Suella Braverman?
Well, I think you can see we've got a very broad church of a Conservative Party. People like me from the north of England, people like David Cameron, who've had a huge amount of experience in government from right across the country. And I think it's really good. You can see a strong and united party coming together now for the future. We've got those big aims that the Prime Minister's already outlined, and there'll be some big decisions on those those coming up this week. We've seen that real push to get inflation down. We've got some numbers coming up on that on Wednesday. He's wanted to halve it by the end of the year. We've made some really good progress, but further still to go. Obviously, we've got the court case around Rwanda happening later this week as well, but we've made huge progress, and I think that's where we want to see you as stepping forwards even further now, and that's why this reshuffle has really refreshed the party as well.
Or has it widened the sort of chasms within the party? I mean, just looking at some of the headlines this morning, Cameron's return sparks Brexiteer backlash, as the Telegraph. But it's the Express that says, who will speak up for the Red Wall? And I wonder this morning, has Rishi Sunak completely given up on the Red Wall?
Well, look, I'm a Red Wall MP elected up there. I've got colleagues like Robbie from Keighley, who's in government as well, like Andrew Stevenson from over in Pendle too, like Lee Rowley from North East Derbyshire as well. So I think you've got some promotions from within the Red Wall as well. You know, seats like mine, covering the former steel town of Consett, you know, nobody thought those seats would be Conservative, but I'm still out there battling for my constituents on a daily basis. I think there's very strong voices from right across the Red Wall, whether it's me as party chairman, or people like Lee Rowley as the housing minister, or people like Andrew Stevenson over in health. I think we've got a really good cross-section of people from right across the country.
That's good to hear, but it's not those people that are being talked about today. It's a guy that represents maybe the south of England and the hierarchy, the grandees of the Conservative Party. David Cameron, where does he fit into all of this with those Red Wall voters?
Well, I think, you know, there's always been a base of Conservative support right across the country, and it's right that we're a proper broad party which reflects the country as well. I don't think anybody, you know, I think what's particularly nice about seeing what David Cameron said yesterday is that when the Prime Minister asked him to serve his country and step back up after he'd served as party leader for 11 years, Prime Minister for 6 years, that he's come back to do that. I think that's really important. But I think you've seen, as I've said, a party really reflected of the entire country, and that's just so important that as a broad Conservative party we reflect all of that as well. I think that David Cameron brings huge experience as well, but you've got to remember as well that Rishi Sunak, when he was a new MP under David Cameron back in 2015, 2016, you know, Rishi backed Brexit as well. So we have that broad party, and I think that's what's so important, that we can take a united, strong party, but a broad party concentrating on the priorities of the British people into the next general election, and I think that's what Rishi's delivered.
When you are talking about David Cameron there, I'm not being facetious here, but it's as if you've got a spring in your step. It's as if you've got wind in your sails. It's almost as if you're emotional about this guy coming. Do you see, what way do you see him? I mean, this second coming of Cameron here, does it make you emotional? Are you proud?
I think it's great that we've got a broad party right across the country. Look, I joined the party when William Hague, a fellow Northerner, was leader back in the early 2000s, and you know, I'm really proud that to be part of a broad party representing everywhere from Hertsmere to Hartlepool, and that's what I want to see for our country. A really broad church, people like me representing Red Wall seats in north of England, and people like David Cameron, people of great experience, former Prime Ministers, and people from you know, every background, every walk of life. I think that's what the Conservative Party represents. Wherever you're from, you can get on. Wherever you're from, you've got something to offer the country. And as I was party chairman yesterday and I walked into the office, I saw that poster from 1992 of John Major, which said, what does a Conservative Party do for a working class lad from Brixton? They made him Prime Minister. We've got a really strong tradition of aspiration from whatever background you're from in the Conservative Party, and I think that's something that I want to see championed. I think it's something that the Prime Minister is championing in government as he delivers on those priorities which affect my constituents in North West Durham as much as they affect people across the rest of the country. like getting inflation down, which is so important, getting economic growth there, stopping the boats. All of those things are really important. They're not just important in one part of the country, they're important for the whole country.
And yet to be achieved. I believe the Foreign Office were emotional as well about the arrival of David Cameron. Very pleased to see that. But there are people who are saying, hold on a minute, here we have a Prime Minister who hasn't been chosen by the British population, and now we have a Foreign Secretary who isn't even an MP. Rishi Sunak couldn't find amongst his 350 elected MPs somebody to sit in that post. And there is also a big question about whether or not Rishi Sunak was talking nonsense at party conference when he was talking about change. This is back to the future, isn't it?
Well, let's address some of those things head on. First of all, the Prime Minister really did outline that we need to break a consensus there, and there has been a consensus which has not been delivering for the British people. But there are some things, particularly when I think of education reform, that has carried right the way through since the Conservatives came in 2010. We saw 2/3 of kids then going to good or outstanding schools. That's over 85% today. We saw as sliding down the international league tables and things like reading and writing under the last Labour government now really soaring in England in that sort of achievement. So there are definitely positives there. When it comes to David Cameron's position in the House of Lords, look, this is something that's happened before. We saw Nicky Morgan, former DCMS secretary in the House of Lords. Previously, we've seen, I'm old enough just about to remember Peter Carrington, who was in the House of Lords when I worked there briefly, who was Mrs Thatcher's Foreign Secretary as well. Obviously, Lord Mandelson, was a Secretary of State under Labour from the House of Lords, and actually Deputy Prime Minister, I think, or First Secretary of State, I think Gordon Brown called it. So it's not unprecedented at all. And I think if you want to get that widest range of talent in there, yes, you want people coming up, people like Laura Trott, who's been made in the Cabinet in the last day, a good friend of mine from the south of England, but you also got people like me from the north of England as well coming through. You also want that really wide range of experience, including people like David Cameron as well.
Richard Holden, thank you very much indeed. We're only stopping to let you pause for breath because you just went on there and on and on and on, and you're obviously full of enthusiasm. You're really looking forward, obviously, to your job as party chairman. We thank you for your time today, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
Thanks, Eamonn.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Of course.
Well, Claire, I'm sure you were sitting itching. We've got a minute or so just to sum up what Richard was saying there, right? So, come on.
I don't quite know where to start, but anyway, I thought, well, one thing to note that we haven't talked about, rather than just being mean, is that they've brought Cameron into the Lords, and there is an issue there about a Foreign Secretary, which is a very big position.
It's not like there's no
being held to account
at the moment
in the Lords. Now,
Yeah.
I'm an unelected member of the House of Lords, and I'm very conscious of the anti-democratic nature of that particular House. But it's not the same being held to account at the dispatch box of the Lords than in the Commons.
Got 20 seconds.
I don't have the same worries about the House of Lords. Andrew Donis was our Transport Secretary, and I think it can be handled. On Richard Holden, congratulations to him, because he was the buses minister I used to deal with quite a lot, and it's a big promotion for him, and he's clearly going to enjoy it.
Oh, he certainly has got the enthusiasm for it, that said. Claire and Norman will be back in 40 minutes' time. We look forward to seeing them. We look forward to seeing you after this short break. Please don't go away.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquire, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. It's coming up to 7 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 14th of November. Welcome to Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
You're always very welcome, whether you're listening, whether you're watching, whether you're online, whatever you're doing. Here's what's leading the news on GB News this morning.
Suella Braverman's out, David Cameron is back, and new battle lines are drawn in the party. The Prime Minister is appearing to shun the right of the party. We're asking who speaks up for them now. Olivia Utley with the latest.
Well, it's the morning after the night before, and Cabinet Ministers are sitting down in a couple of hours for their first meeting. Will David Cameron be welcomed with open arms? Or will there be those on the right of the party who feel that they're not being spoken for anymore? Find out more with me just after 7.
Yes, it seems there are people like that, Olivia, and they're contacting our programme this morning. We are taking your views on Rishi Sunak's latest move to hold on to power. Some of the things you've been saying are these.
It's a mistake. I think she speaks a lot of sense.
I think it was the right call because her views are a bit too much.
I think it's a bit unfair. I think she does speak for the British people, really.
Other news this morning, the mother of murder victim James Bulger pleads with the parole board to reject his bid for freedom. John Venables' hearing is set to take place later today.
Storm Debbie still wreaking havoc across the country. It's the latest storm to cause flooding and travel disruption for planes and trains, with the Met Office releasing a yellow weather warning. We'll keep you posted.
And with that, Alex Deakin will have your weather.
Storm Debbie may have gone, but we're not done with the downpours or the gusty winds, or indeed the Met Office weather warnings. Join me later for a full forecast.
And here is a warning on the sports front. Paul Coit will be here very shortly with all your sports details. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning. Ready? OK, here we go. So Wimbledon are in all sorts of trouble. They want to expand, but the council don't seem to want to let them. Emma Raducanu, the comeback has been scuppered, and Neil Warnock has got a 5-point plan to save VAR.
You see, I think Neil Warnock could do that. He's straight talking, no messing about.
Yes.
Old school.
On the money. He's the guy, and he's absolutely right. We'll go through.
Good. Hope he gets the job. You can join in any of our discussions. Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBNews.
And we should just say it's His Majesty the King's birthday today.
Happy birthday,
So
sir.
we should wish him a very happy birthday. Happy
He's
birthday,
75 today.
75 years young.
Yeah, OK. OK, new battle lines have been drawn up in the Tory party as the fallout from Rishi Sunak's cabinet reshuffle continues into today.
The sacking of former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has fuelled a Tory civil war as one MP published a formal letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister.
In just a few hours' time, Sunak's new cabinet will meet as some familiar and surprising faces take their positions around the table.
Well, with former Prime Minister and Remainer David Cameron taking his seat as Foreign Secretary, has Rishi Sunak betrayed the right of his party? Let's bring in our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, who's in Westminster. And Olivia, you'll have heard the government there in the form of Richard Holden, the new party chairman, trying to say that absolutely the right is still represented under Sunak's new cabinet. Are you persuaded by that?
Well, it'll be really interesting to see if that line can possibly hold. At the moment, I've spoken to quite a few MPs on the right of the party, as it were, who are not happy at all about the sacking of Suella Braverman. They feel as though there is just no one in the cabinet now who is willing to speak up for them. Now, Esther McVey, formerly of GBNews, has been brought in as a Cabinet Office Minister without portfolio. Unofficially, she's the sort of Minister for Common Sense. She's there to kind of tackle wokery. But is that enough? There are those who feel that after winning over the Red Wall in 2019, the Conservatives need to stick with their no-nonsense approach, with their stop-the-boats approach, with their with Suella Braverman's essentially rhetoric on immigration. Now, how much of a fuss are those MPs going to kick up? Well, before Suella Braverman was sacked, I was hearing that there are about 50 or 60 MPs, quite a few of whom I spoke to myself, who said that they would get really, really angry if she were to go. Plenty of them saying that they'd write in their letters of no confidence. That said, of course, there are those in the Conservative Party, probably a caucus about the same size, about 50 or 60 MPs, who really didn't like Suella Braverman, who thought that her rhetoric on immigration was dangerous and who thought that the party needed to move back towards the centre. Now, Rishi Sunak assumes that they're going to be pretty happy with the appointment of David Cameron, the man who led the coalition government, and he thinks that their views will be reflected by quite a lot of people in the country. The Conservative battle for seats is now playing out both in the Red Wall and in the sort of former Conservative safe seats in the south. And it's those seats which at the moment are kind of battlegrounds with the Lib Dems, which Rishi Sunak is hoping might be won over by someone like David Cameron coming back into power. Well, that's what everyone around this former great Prime Minister is saying. But what does the man himself have to say? Let's have a look.
The Prime Minister asked me to do this job, and it's a time where we have some daunting challenges as a country. The conflict in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, and of course, I hope that 6 years as Prime Minister, 11 years leading the Conservative Party gives me some useful experience and contacts and relationships and knowledge that I can help the Prime Minister to make sure we build our alliances, we build partnerships with our friends, we deter our enemies, and we keep our country strong. That's why I'm doing the job, and I'm delighted to accept.
What really struck me about that interview with David Cameron was the extent to which he's sort of owning that brief of Foreign Secretary. In the past, there have been a few Foreign Secretaries who have been sort of had the position in name only, but when actually push comes to shove, when a serious event happens abroad, when the voice of the UK needs to be represented on the international stage, it is usually the Prime Minister who ends up stepping in. Rishi Sunak is hoping that with David Cameron's experience, which he talked about there, with his contacts, with his reputation on the international stage, the issue of foreign affairs can actually really be left to the Foreign Secretary, leaving Rishi Sunak able to deal with the very serious problems that he's got to contend with at home, and of course, leave him free to gear up for a general election. Now, obviously, the news about David Cameron is what's dominating the headlines this morning, but of course there have been some other moves in the cabinet too, and some of them could be quite significant. One thing that I thought was quite interesting was Steve Barclay has moved over to the environment brief from Health. Victoria Atkins has moved over to Health. Incidentally, her husband is managing director at British Sugar. She's now the health secretary. Interesting to see how that plays out. And what I find most interesting of all, Laura Trott has been moved into the role of Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Now, Laura Trott was a David Cameron special advisor back in the 2010 era. So it's not just David Cameron making a big comeback here. We've now got Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, a really close ally of David Cameron, Cameron himself and Laura Trott, all sitting around the cabinet table. To me, that marks a really marked shift in what Rishi Sunak is trying to do. Gone is Suella Braverman, the woman who is willing to speak out about immigration, willing to address those uncomfortable truths, who had the support of those on the right of the Conservative Party. And back are these figures from the coalition government, a coalition, of course, with the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you very much indeed. So, how will David Cameron find it working under Rishi Sunak's government? And why would a former Prime Minister want to make a return to frontline politics.
Well, let's get the views of his former advisor, Philip Blond, who was speaking to GB News on our special coverage last night.
I wonder, what is the question to which David Cameron was the answer? You know, what is the party? The party must, in essence, be giving up on the red wall. It must be giving up on its majority in 2019 and decided to defend its seats in the home counties.
That was a GB News special with our political editor, Christopher Hope, and you can still watch that. That is available at gbnews.com.
Now, there are rumours in Westminster that the sacking of Suella Braverman was a bid to end a power struggle between the former Home Secretary and the Prime Minister.
What's certain is that her controversial comments on migrants, pro-Palestinian marches and policing divided opinion and put her in the firing line of the Prime Minister.
Well, we are reading through your emails this morning, and we'll reflect some of those throughout the course of the programme, but we've also been getting your views from her constituency of Fareham in Hampshire.
It's a mistake. I think she speaks a lot of sense, and I think she's speaking for what a lot of the British public are thinking.
I think she's quite viperous and underhand, but she's not stupid, and I think she's doing it for her own reasons, i.e. to have a go at the leadership.
It's been a bit premature, actually, considering what she stood for, being a Brexiteer, and the small boat situation, and the other things that she was involved with, and all the thing about, I believe she was right when she talks about all these protesters, that they are hate crime.
I think it was the right call, because her views are a bit too much.
I think it's a bit unfair. I think she does speak for the British people, really.
It's just a ploy to get to be leader, probably of the opposition, when or if they lose the election. So I think she's just trying to provoke stuff, and I think some of the stuff she said is not nice, and I don't think she really believe in it. I think she's just playing to a certain crowd.
Some breaking news to bring you now this morning. This from the Office for National Statistics, and we're hearing that average regular earnings have increased by 7.7%. That's in the 3 months to September, and that lifted 1% after taking consumer prices index inflation into account, and the rate of unemployment has remained unchanged at 4.2%. No doubt we will have some reaction to that from the Chancellor in the next half hour or so. We'll keep an eye on all of the latest for you on that. But to see that average earnings have increased by 7.7%, are you feeling that? Have you noticed that?
I'm definitely not.
Let us know if you've had a pay rise lately.
I don't believe... I mean, I say this all the time. I say to my wife, we'll not be buying things for Christmas, these unnecessary presents. And she says, oh, shut up. But you see, that my point is, she will buy just nonsense for nonsense people, you know, just to be seen to be like... just,
yeah,
you know,
like me, like a candle or something.
Correct. You'll be getting a £100 candle, and I'll be looking and saying, what are you paying £100 for a candle for her for?
I always look forward to the candles from Eamonn and Ruth.
So that's that. You should see our house. It's like a church. But the thing is, I think that the cost of living is so high, the damage is so bad, and I mean, you go to a restaurant, you go to a takeaway, you go to an entertainment complex, the cinema, it'll cost you 20 quid in London for a ticket to go to the cinema. That's without your sweeties, without your ice cream and your Maltesers and everything else. I just, Isabel, just can't see how people will feel any better, can be any better off.
Absolutely, and this is 100% the challenge of Sunak's government, frankly. You know, they need to get inflation down, they need to make people feel better off, because if their wages are increasing that much, it's not much, really, when you account for where we are in terms of inflation, 1% or something. So,
but here's the thing, will you make yourself go broke buying Christmas presents? Or will you...
I've already said to my husband, I will be furious if I get a Christmas present this year. I don't want a present at all from my husband.
Wasteful,
but that's because we've just moved house and we are stony broke.
Yeah.
But next year, I can return the
recognise you're
present. Yeah, we just need
broke.
to be sensible, you know.
Yeah.
Can't have it all at once. So.
Well, yeah. Or maybe we should just make things for people. Like
well, I actually think that that's...
coat hanger with tinsel on it or
yeah,
something.
or just something like spend time with somebody, you know. Would I... a gift of, you know, actually enjoying someone's company rather than buying them something that, you know, you could just do on Amazon or whatever, which is totally meaningless. Let us know if you're changing the way you approach Christmas in light of how you're feeling financially.
Right, here's another thing. Diwali. good luck to you with Diwali. I don't know what it is, but it's very good. Good luck, whatever.
Festival of Colour, isn't it? Festival of Colour, and yeah.
Yeah, so what does that mean?
Well, it's a big religious festival, I think, for Hindus.
Correct. It's a religious festival for Hindus. Right, OK. So Easter's a religious festival for Christians. Christmas is a religious festival for Christians. And you're going to get into a situation whereby if you watch Channel 4, the BBC, people are saying, and we hope you're having a great Diwali. Now, if you are, good luck to you. But I'm not having a great Diwali. And no one comes on TV and says to me, hope you're having a great Easter. Yes, the resurrection of Christ at Easter. No, they don't. They don't. So what is it? This country is so fixated with not offending anybody that they'll offend the Christian basis of the country. They won't care about that. But if you're any other religion, good luck, we'll praise you till the cows come home. As I say, Diwali, if somebody's Hindu and they want to invite me to their Diwali celebrations, I will be leading the queue. I'll be very happy. I'd like to find out about that. So what do you do during Diwali? I mean, do you ever hear anybody saying, I hope you're having a good Lent?
No.
No, you do not. You do not at all. You know, so what is this? Honestly, Channel 4 gets so enthusiastic about Diwali.
It's in schools as well. So
What's it in schools for?
Well, I just think back to at our previous school, they didn't mention Jesus or anything relating to the Christmas story around the Christmas. It was all secular. It was all season's greetings, snowman, Frosty the Snowman.
So you're not allowed to use the word Christ.
They got sent homework, extensive homework,
on Diwali,
to learn all about Diwali and the practices involved. And now, as a family, we know all about Diwali. But I did think it was a bit strange that they then didn't do the same.
Why would I have to know about Diwali?
Well, there were kids in the class who were Hindus and from Hindu families, and so it's nice to understand and educate and learn. No problem with that, but don't squeeze out. You know,
so do they still do? Do they still do? You know, Christmas carols? Do they do?
Nope, not a single carol.
Seriously?
No.
You are pulling my leg.
I'm serious. Not a single carol. It was all secular, seasonal. You know, Frosty the Snowman.
Yes.
Jack Frost.
So it's not Away in a Manger or anything
Nothing
like
that mentioned anything to do with the Christmas story.
Away in a manger, no room for a babe.
It's one of my favourite songs, but I would kill it at 7:15 in a bad way.
Lays down his sweet head.
I can do the action.
And if you're celebrating Diwali and you're offended by that, I'm really sorry, but that's our kick this time of the year. So. It's just Channel 4 gets so excited by it.
But do they not celebrate Christmas at Channel 4? I don't know. We'll have to study it. They definitely will have a tree. But will they mention...
Anyway. So the time is now 60 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock. We just put that out there for debate with you all. I honestly, it's like St. Patrick's Day. I just look at the English and I think, why do you not celebrate St. George's Day? Because I'll celebrate it. I'm not even English. I'll celebrate it for you.
I'll celebrate Paddy Day. How about that?
Absolutely. Everybody celebrates St. Patrick's Day. So, and St. Patrick's Day is quite a religious festival as well, you know, but it is what it is. Let us know what you think. Meanwhile, the mother of James Bulger, the murder victim, has begged the parole board, to oversee the potential release of her son's killer, John Venables, to reject Venables' bid for freedom.
Well, let's bring in our reporter, Ray Addison, who will be in court following this for us today.
Thanks, Eamonn and Isabel. Well, it was February the 12th, 1993, when 2-year-old James Bulger was snatched during a shopping trip to the Strand shopping centre in Merseyside. But 2 days later, his body is found by children on a railway line just 2 miles from the shopping centre. John Venables, who was 10 years old at the time when he and Robert Thompson murdered James, and after 8 years in jail, they were both freed on licence and given lifelong anonymity. But in 2017, John Venables was jailed again after child abuse images were found on his computer. Now, not only could Venables be released, but James's parents have been barred from attending the parole hearing. Instead, Ralph and Denise have issued impact statements begging the parole board to keep their son's killer behind bars. Of course, they're terrified that Venables will reoffend. In her plea to the parole board, James's mother, Denise, said, "Look into my eyes and see what I've had to deal with for 30 years, 3 decades of hell. Make the right decision for everyone and keep my son's killer behind bars." Now, during the parole hearing, the panel will look for any evidence of behavioural change. They're going to be questioning key witnesses, including probation officers, psychiatrists, and, if he's willing to give evidence, John Venables himself. And of course, if they decide that he poses a manageable risk to the public, he could be released before Christmas. Now, of course, it all comes as the Victims and Prisoners Bill is currently going through Parliament. It promises tougher measures aimed at strengthening the parole system and making public protection the top priority in deciding which prisoners are safe for release. It will also give ministers greater oversight and the power to overturn release decisions for the most serious offenders.
Gosh, time flies, doesn't it? It feels like yesterday that all happened, and the families involved in these sorts of horrendous murders never, ever, ever give up fighting for what they perceive to be justice, to keep killers behind bars. It's not just one life that's taken in the case of a child murder. It's the whole family lose their life, I believe.
Yeah. Weather warnings in place across the country. This was Storm Debbie yesterday. She came in with a bit of a vengeance.
She did.
You may have experienced the winds and the torrential rain. So they haven't gone away, as far as we know. The Met Office has warned of delays to train services and road closures.
Well, our reporters Jeff Moody and Thea Jacomba are out and about for us this morning, just getting a little test of how things are. Let's start in the southwest with you, Jeff. You're usually getting a bit of a battering from the weather. Sorry about that. How is it where you are?
That's all right, I don't mind. It's not too bad, really. I mean, the worst of the storm has passed. Overnight was when the winds were really ferocious, when the rain was really torrential too. But the worst of the damage was in Ireland, in Northern Ireland and in parts of Scotland. Winds there reached 77 miles per hour overnight, and we're hearing that around 100,000 homes this morning are without power in Northern Ireland. Only one injury reported at the moment. A woman in Limerick was hit by flying debris and has been hospitalised, but is not thought to be too serious. But there is a weather warning still in place along the south coast. That's only a yellow weather warning, so it's not as serious as we saw with Storm Ciarán a couple of weeks ago, but there is a very strong risk of localised flooding in places and those strong winds as the storm begins to pass. It's passing out towards the North Sea at the moment. After the storm, in its wake, as it were, that's when you can get some very, very heavy winds and very, very heavy rain too. Well, it's the 4th named storm of the season. The meteorological storm season begins in September, and it's the earliest that we have reached the letter D in the alphabet. Normally they reach D midway through December, so this is the earliest that we've seen one of these storms. But it does look as though the worst has passed. But don't forget, those weather warnings still in place for much of the morning, particularly if you're in the south coast of England.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Well, let's cross to Thea Jacomba, who's at Paddington Station for us this morning. Thea, we were speaking a little bit earlier to Simon Calder, who was telling us what a nightmare it is out on the trains. I think particularly lines between Leeds and, where was it, Wakefield, that were,
Doncaster,
rail replacement and all sorts. So bring us up to date on how it's looking from a sort of public transport perspective this morning. Not sure if we can adjust your microphone there. Struggling to hear you at the moment. Anything we can do to fix that? OK, Thea, let's try again. No, sorry, I'm afraid problems with that line. We do apologise. Thank you very much to Jeff and to Theo. Alas, let's get an update, though, on this all-important weather. Alex Deakin from the Met Office with that.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Debbie may have cleared away, but there's still going to be plenty of downpours around today and gusty winds, particularly already across the southwest of England. Narrow band of very heavy rain is working across southern counties of England. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, flashes of lightning, rumbles of thunder and blustery wind. The Met Office do have a yellow warning in place for those thundery showers. Elsewhere, there'll be quite a few showers through the day, but some sunny spells over the Midlands, Wales, parts of East Anglia as well. In the sunshine, we might squeak into the teens, but further north, lots of showers and lots of cloud, feeling fairly chilly. Temperatures 9 to 11 Celsius at best. More showers to come this evening as well for central Scotland, feeding into Northern Ireland. Frequent heavy showers here and across northern England. Further south, well, a few, particularly in the southwest, but many places will be dry and largely clear as well. Some clearer skies and lighter winds in northern Scotland could allow temperatures to get down to freezing, but for most will be in single figures, 6 to 8 Celsius in most towns and cities. Bit of a north-south split then to start tomorrow. There'll be showers across the north of Northern Ireland, feeding into northern England, central and southern Scotland. Northern Scotland seeing a mostly dry and fine day, and much of the south actually having sunny spells and not too many showers through Wednesday. Decent chance of a dry day here. Still on the cool side for most though, 7 to 9 across the north, 10 to 13 further south.
So, storms surrounding Suella Braverman as well. She's gone. Should her policies go with her? We'll be debating that next.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now, if you haven't seen the news, maybe you've been hiding under a rock, because yesterday, Suella Braverman was sacked as Home Secretary after she defied Number 10 over an article accusing the Metropolitan Police of bias in the policing of protests.
Although her allies have insisted she spoke on behalf of the people, should her policies now stay, even though she has gone?
Well, political commentator and former MEP Patrick O'Flynn and former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, are here to fight it out this morning. Let's start with you, Patrick O'Flynn. Are you in mourning? Do you regret the loss of Suella Braverman from the Cabinet and as Home Secretary?
I certainly do. I think she spoke for at least half the country with her point about two-tier policing. I think she was going to get whacked even before that row blew up, because we're told that Sunak had been talking to Cameron for a little while, certainly before that row happened, and the only conceivable position David Cameron could have come back into the Cabinet to was Foreign Secretary, which meant James Cleverly was being moved. And if you look at James Cleverly, he does look like a Home Secretary. So I think that was always nailed on. And Suella's number was up quite a while ago. I think it's a very arrogant and cynical move by Rishi Sunak, who needs to bear in mind he has no mandate. He has no mandate from the British people. Okay. He doesn't even have a mandate from the Conservative Party membership.
Patrick, case made. Charlie, what do you say?
Well, in answer to your question, Eamonn, I think some of the policies will remain. If we're looking at Rwanda, the Rwanda policy, we're getting that announcement by the Supreme Court tomorrow. I think there has to be more police on the street. That's something that the government has already delivered on, 20,000 new police officers on the street. So Mark Rowley has already said he wants to give them more powers, to give them more confidence in making arrests that they believe they need to make, rather than getting bogged down in any other kind of woke kind of discussion. But it's just a plain and simple fact that the rhetoric that Suella Braverman was putting forward, the language she was using, was clearly turning off the electorate. It was making the Conservative Party in some quarters seem as though it was the nasty party again. That's not a position that any party wants to be in the run-up to a general election. And I think it's the kind of language that she used, I think pushing the limits of her PR machine against the Prime Minister, upstaging him at times, obviously appealing to maybe the party base rather than the country, I think was the reason why ultimately she had to go.
The policy is unsuccessful at the Supreme Court tomorrow. Do you think that we will see James Cleverly continuing what Suella Braverman has promised to do and call for us to withdraw from the ECHR and for that UN Convention on Human Rights to be rewritten?
Well, I think we'll just have to wait and see what the result is. James Cleverly had an interview, I think, yesterday outside the Home Office, where he refused to commit to withdrawing from the EHCR. But I think, as the Prime Minister has previously said, all options should remain on the table. And if it's not necessarily leaving the EHCR, you can attempt to reform it in some way, because it might not be up to as modern for the day in which we need it to operate today. And I think there could be movement there, because, as you see, places like Germany are already looking at our Rwanda attempts and are trying to put in something similar themselves. So I think that policy will remain. I think that'll be something, even if it's voted down in the courts, that the Prime Minister will still want to continue, and James Cleverly will pick up that mantle and continue the message to try and stop the votes, because that is a #1 issue still for many people in this country.
Yeah, one of his big pledges. Patrick, if Charlie is right that these policies do remain, but Suella Braverman is gone, is it just her rhetoric, then, that you are grieving?
No, I think there's a policy crunch coming up. If the court judgment tomorrow goes against the government, then clearly Suella Braverman I think she'd have come out and say that she aimed to persuade cabinet colleagues at the next meeting that Britain had to leave the European Convention and its supervisory court. And if she hadn't been able to persuade them, notably the Prime Minister, she would have resigned on a point of principle and, you know, gone around the country making her case for that. So Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, interestingly, is writing an interview piece this morning suggesting the government has got a really crafty plan B up its sleeve. Well, I'd like to see what that is, because James Cleverly is now the third Home Secretary in a row who is pledging to stop the boats, and this has been going on for the best part of 5 years now. Suella Braverman, as a lawyer, her position was this can't really be done within the current framework of international law, and we have to step back from some of our obligations. On balance, I think she's right.
I get all that, Patrick, but what's her case for homeless people choosing to sleep out in the streets as a lifestyle choice?
Well, I think that's her biggest misstep of the last few weeks, because when you have a housing crisis, even people who are right of centre would think it can't be as simple as that. I do think there are people with drug dependency, mental health issues, who do turn down places in supervised hostels because they don't want the regime.
Choose to be addicts, do they?
No, they don't choose to be addicts, that's right. So I think that's what she was getting at. I personally am very glad that someone is taking the side of the wider general public about our public spaces needing to be protected. I think allowing rough sleeping is wrong. I would like to see a place for everyone inside.
A really brief answer from you, Charlie, on this, if you will. Do you think that the policy to stop charities handing out tents to homeless people should be continued under James Cleverly?
No. Charities should be able to help those that are most in need. That's what they're there to do. They do a brilliant job, and anything that they can do to help people that are in the most desperate need should be able to continue to do that.
Charlie Riley, Patrick O'Flynn, thank you both very much indeed. Now we throw the ball in the court of Paul Coyte, and he'll tell you what's happening sports-wise.
You know, firstly, I've got Neil Warnock. I know Neil Warnock is a... Morning, Neil. He is a viewer, isn't he? I know he enjoys the show.
Yes, Neil does watch.
I know. So, but he's spoken a lot of sense. So he said it in The Sun today, actually, talking about VAR, and he's got a 5-point plan to try and sort this out. I had messages the other day saying, could you just let us know what VAR is? Because they hear a lot of talk about VAR. It's a video-assisted referee, which happens during games. It's making games go longer, long decisions where they'll look back and look over that. I know most people know what that is. So this is what Neil said. He said he'd set a 30-second time limit for decisions to be made.
Ooh, that's short.
But you know what? They're saying, you know, it's got to be clear and obvious. So if they look at it and it's like, because you can't be waiting 5 minutes, and this is the problem. Do you think a little bit longer than 30 seconds?
I think a little bit longer. I would say this about VAR, right?
Yeah.
It is not perfect, definitely not perfect. I thought it would be implemented quite straightforwardly. Yeah. But now that it's here, I don't think you can take it away.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And also, it's evidence. What is being seen actually happened. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the time, things are right, but it's only when they're wrong is when there's a problem. He also says, stop using slow-mo replays that make incidents look worse, because then you see it backwards and forwards. You see a foot go into an ankle and then over, and it looks worse that way. So that's pretty good. Change the offside rule so there must be clear daylight between attacking and defending player. The thing is, though, if you change that and you're looking for... Yeah. Then you could have, there's a little bit of daylight, because it's the same thing as a toenail. There's got to be a line somewhere.
Paul, I remember year after year, you go back 8 years ago or so, it's always about giving the attacker the advantage in an offside situation. Yeah. But that does not happen.
No.
I don't understand why goals are ruled off because someone's got a toenail jutting across the line or whatever. The advantage should be given to the attacker all the time.
I think that's good, but also, if there is a line drawn, it's got to be somewhere, and someone, whether it be that much or that much, is going to be offside. So where do you say what truly is offside? So one more from him, and he says, allow the refs the freedom to use common sense and stop being robots. And that's what everybody should.
Imagine if you and me were in there dictating all the video replays and what was going on.
It's it's another goal given to Manchester United. He was clearly offside. How
Clearly as a goal, clearly. Yeah.
Listen, we got time for a quick video from Peru.
Always for you. This is from Peru.
This is from Peru.
Paddington Bears from Peru.
Darkest Peru, from Lima, from Peru. You can almost hear the celebratory panpipes. Now, here's a game going on. Universidad Deportes beat their rivals Alianza Lima 2-0. Now, the lights have gone out. Now, what's happened is that Universitario, they won the Peruvian League at their rival stadium. So they're about to celebrate, and they're thinking, this is fantastic, we're going to get presented the cup. The home side thought, you know what? Sod this for a game of soldiers. Let's turn the lights off so nobody can see it and nobody can see. Look at this.
So bad sports.
They are livid about it and they wanted investigation.
Maybe it was time for the caretaker to go home. Done his hours.
That's it. Do you think that's what it was?
Could well have been.
So Liverpool are at Old Trafford. Yes. It's a night game. They're about to celebrate. You're in charge of the lights. Yeah. Let them celebrate at home. So that's what they've done. Turn the lights out.
But as Isabel would say, it's such bad sportsmanship.
Bad sportsmanship, but you know what? I wouldn't blame them either.
Oh, Paul.
Very good. My friend, thank you very much indeed. See you again in an hour's time.
Stay with us. Lots more coming your way, including, is a loophole allowing landlords to rent properties in shameful conditions? We'll be discussing that and more in Headline Makers after this.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth.
It's on your teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Joining us to go through some of the newspapers and other things that make the news today, Norman Baker, friend of the show, and we have got Claire Fox, who's a sort of friend of the show, but I don't see that much off you, Claire. I don't see you that.
Too busy baronessing.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be a friend of the
Good. Right, Claire, we begin with you. Rishi Sunak's cabinet reshuffle, OK? And it means that Esther McVeigh, previously of this parish, may not be allowed to work on GB News while she's in cabinet.
Well, the headline that I've chosen is Daily Mail, Bernardo's girl who said she's a Liverpudlian who dared to be a Conservative. And obviously, viewers of GB News will know Esther, but actually she is a very good MP, very outspoken MP, and I think has been very principled around things like lockdown, obviously Brexit, and ensuring she would be described as a blue-collar Conservative, if you see what I mean. So I really got a lot of time for her, but I can't help, and I can understand why she's taken the position, but it's a little bit like Nigel Farage going in the jungle. It's a bit like, what are you doing that for, Esther? Because she's been given an opportunity to go into cabinet as somebody who's without portfolio, apparently, fighting wokeness wherever it is.
The civil service.
The Minister of Common Sense. You do think, oh, God.
It's the title that was a little bit patchy. I 100% understand what you mean.
Even when we were listening earlier to Richard, the new chair of the Conservative Party, you can't help but think, well, all the important jobs are over here with the kind of patricians, right? The kind of patrician technocrats. So we're going to be all sensible grown-ups back in the room. As far as I'm concerned, that's betraying the realignment that people voted for in 2019, very often unelected. And then suddenly there's all these kind of red wall types given jobs. And you just think it's like, oh, you're sort of saying to Brett, well, it's all right, we've got a few of your lot in.
Yeah.
There's something about it just... So I hope... I understand why Esther might do it. I think she will be a champion for people,
common
as she
sense.
has been, for common sense. And yet something about it is dangerously condescending.
What's the Bernardo's girl reference? I don't know that.
Oh, right, because the big thing about Esther... Well, not the big thing. Something which she's discussed is that she was in foster care.
I didn't know that.
She came from a challenging background. And I think she's got a point, by the way, which is there is people who will say, well, why would somebody like you and your background be a Conservative? I actually think that the left-right divisions no longer work. I'm certainly not a Conservative, never voted for them. Actually, I did vote for Thatcher when I was 18 because the Labour Party just sold out the steelworks locally and I was so mad. So I didn't really understand politics then. Since then, I haven't. But I do think that the hopes of many, many ordinary people were around changing politics for good in terms of Brexit and then voting for Boris, and they were let
Norman,
down.
I always remember as a kid watching telly, Till Death Us Do Part, Alf Garnett.
Yes.
And I could never understand why this man who worked in the docks or whatever was a Conservative voter, but sort of adequately explained there by Claire.
Well, you go back far enough, there's an episode of Steptoe and Son where Albert, the dad, is a Tory and Harold is a Labour Party member, which is quite an interesting episode. In fact, I heard it on the radio the other day on Radio 4 Extra. You wouldn't be able to do that these days, I don't think. You'd be all sorts of complaints about such a programme. But you find Conservatives where you don't expect them and Labour where you don't expect them as well.
Well, exactly. Tony Blair wasn't your obvious Labour leader, was he? Public school boy and Oxford PE, whatever it was.
I'll dig into my reserves.
Thank you very much. I might do that.
Pass a pint your way.
No, you're right. I mean, the Labour Party at the moment is nothing like the way that one would traditionally associate. I mean, it's all kind of highly professionalised. You know what I mean?
Well, you've got the Angela Rayner, who, again, is the token position.
Without going there. But, I mean, if you look at the makeup of the Labour Party, it doesn't represent the people who traditionally were Labour. But just on the rest of the reshuffle, just one thing. I like this point made in the Telegraph, actually, that there's been more housing ministers than Chelsea FC managers since 2010.
Yeah. I think there's been 15 in 13 years or something.
Housing's one of my big passions, right? And we've had 16 housing ministers.
16.
There's actually very little in the King's speech to go on about, but there are two important big housing bills. Something I'm very interested in is the Leasehold Reform Bill. I think it should be abolished, not reformed, but that's that. But also the Renting Act. And now we've basically... I'm just worried about the fact somebody's just getting stuck into that.
Well,
and they're sacked, and we've got a new person in.
Well, it shows their commitment and their belief in it, which obviously is non-existent. Norman, so you've taken this story from the Guardian, and this is a loophole which allows landlords to rent out squalid homes.
Yes, it is. It's called a loophole, and I think it probably is, in the sense that there's no offence committed if you rent out a place which is terrible, which is full of rats and holes in the roof and everything else. Mould. It's not an offence. It only becomes an offence if you're served, as a landlord, if you're served a notice to improve the property and you fail to do so. But of course, you've got plenty of tenants up and down the country who don't know their rights, who think that if they complain they'll get thrown out of their property, who don't necessarily think it's there's an ability to complain about rats and everything else, just live with it. And this is a problem across the country. In England, that is, because in Scotland and Northern Ireland, they've got tougher laws where it's an offence to rent out a property which is in serious disrepair. And it seems to me that's what we should be having in England as well.
Can't disagree. Where should we go?
You should say something on housing ministers, because Claire picked up on that.
Yeah.
Because she's absolutely right. I mean, this is absurd to have so many housing ministers over such a period of time. And actually, when I was at the Department for Transport, 3.5 years there as a minister there, actually I learned quite a lot. And in the end, I knew a lot more than officials who would also move around like on a merry-go-round. You cannot do your job properly unless you've got your feet under the table and you've actually learned the issues. You really can't. And to
for a
have
considerable amount of time.
People coming in and out like getting on and off a bus, it just can't work that way.
Agree.
Should we talk about endometriosis, Claire? At least 2 of the team that I spoke to this morning have suffered with this condition, which relates to painful menstruation. And a leading endometriosis charity have now appointed a 71-year-old transgender woman as their boss. This has been covered in the Telegraph.
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons why I picked up on this. One was because I had very, very bad endometriosis. I didn't know what it was for a long time, and then suddenly gave it a label. But, I mean, anyway, it was the blight of many years of my life. And, of course, doctors, male and female, might well into discussing that with you. And there was some talk about surgery, and I had a male potentially going to be a surgeon. But here we have a situation where a charity that's representing women who have problems with their wombs has appointed somebody who's never had a womb. Steph Richards... is a trans woman, a biological male, therefore. And the criticism is that it's impossible for someone who's born male to suffer with endometriosis or know what it's about. And Millie Hill, an author who's a great author, actually, on women's health, said the appointment was not a one-off, but we are increasingly seeing trans women, men, being appointed to such roles. Women see this as both worrying and insulting, and I do too. And I think that then... the criticism has been met by the usual, you're transphobic, you're anti-trans, but it's like, why are you doing this? The other issue is that Steph Richards is somebody who has actually called gender-critical women like me TERFs, very much part of that kind of culture row. It's not just a trans woman, but an activist in terms of this. It seems to me as though women are being trolled every time you see a women's charity on rape with a trans woman, a biological male put in charge. You think, what on earth's going on?
No, and I totally understand what you're saying. I suppose the way I always think about this is in reverse. How would we feel if a woman was the boss of a male-only condition, or if somebody who hasn't had cancer was head of Cancer Research UK? To be the boss of a charity of a particular condition, do you have to be able to suffer with it, is the question.
Right. Well, let's go on to another... So do you want to answer that question?
No, I was just opening that up, but I mean, to be honest,
no, but
it's a rhetorical question.
I want to talk about this before we run out of time. this claptrap talk by Billie Eilish. Claire, I'm going to disagree with you and want Norman's opinion on this as well. So basically, Billie Eilish, I don't know what shape or form Billie Eilish is. I don't know. How would you describe her?
I don't know.
No, right. So she's a singer, and she says, nobody ever says a thing about men's bodies. If you're muscular, cool. If you're not, it's cool. If you're real thin, cool. If you have a dad bod, cool. If you're pudgy, love it. Everybody's happy with it. You know why? Because girls are nice. They don't give monkeys, because we see people for who they are. Now, I think she's talking rubbish. I speak as a fat man, degraded, constantly. You never read anything about me except that I'm a heavyweight presenter. I just speak from a man's perspective, and it's open season on your body. Norman, would you?
Well, I thought you were called a heavyweight presenter because your intellectual capability.
No,
I never thought
that. I think that the difficulty here is that historically, young women have been very body conscious in a way that has led to all sorts of problems, and there have been idealised visions of women. If anything, what I'd say is that it's now changed so that men, young boys, are also in that position. And what's worrying me is that young people are basically wandering around worrying about their bodies, right? And so you've got a wide-scale phenomena of young boys taking steroids and so on.
I know when I get that in Love Island and whatever plays a big role in all of that. But the biggest critics of women's bodies are women, in my honest opinion about that. And I forget what else I was going to say. But
I think all I'm saying, I just don't think it's a war between the sexes. I know that Billie Eilish is saying that. I don't think it is.
I definitely think women get analysed about their bodies more than men do, without question, whether it's in favour or against.
Do you believe women get everything in the wrong end of the stick? As a feminist, do you believe that?
No, but it's obviously the case that historically, that's what I'm saying, it's changed. But historically, there's been more idealised visions of women that young women have been asked to aspire to.
Right, but here comes the next point, right? Should women not take responsibility, as men should or whatever, if their bodies are out of shape or out of condition?
What?
Well, I don't know about that, but can I make the point that people who are... Well, women who go for top jobs...
No, I just mean from a health point of view.
Yeah.
Women who go for top jobs are often analysed by what they're wearing and what they're looking like and whether they've chosen the right outfit. When men go for top jobs, they're not analysed in the same way at all.
Yeah. I think the thing is...
Do you turn up in a strawberry-coloured suit and things, and it's all OK? So everything.
What, you're in this one?
He looks much smarter than I do.
He's flamboyant, but he's. But you don't think people look and say, "What's he wearing?" or "That's."
Well, they may do, but they don't. I don't think people judge men necessarily on their ability to do a job based on what they're wearing to the same degree as they judge women.
I agree.
Without going overdoing it, if you look at trolling on social media. One of the things that always happens with me is I trend a lot in horrible ways, and people, not trendy, I mean, people will give me lots of abuse because of my politics. But often that political abuse will take the form of ugly.
Yes.
You go for
or what she's wearing.
It's kind of, but it's sexual,
nasty.
but in an anti-sexual way.
I totally understand.
Claire, I'm going for you now, but it's simply because we're out of time, and we've got to look at the weather.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Debbie may have cleared away, but there's still going to be plenty of downpours around today and gusty winds, particularly already across the southwest of England. Narrow band of very heavy rain is working across southern counties of England. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, flashes of lightning, rumbles of thunder and blustery wind. The Met Office do have a yellow warning in place for those thundery showers. Elsewhere, there'll be quite a few showers through the day, but some sunny spells over the Midlands, Wales, parts of East Anglia as well. In the sunshine, we might squeak into the teens, but further north, lots of showers and lots of cloud, feeling fairly chilly. Temperatures 9 to 11 Celsius at best. More showers to come this evening as well for central Scotland, feeding into Northern Ireland. Frequent heavy showers here and across northern England. Further south, well, a few, particularly in the southwest, but many places will be dry and largely clear as well. Some clearer skies and lighter winds in northern Scotland could allow temperatures to get down to freezing, but for most will be in single figures, 6 to 8 Celsius in most towns and cities.
Bit of a north-south split then to start tomorrow. There'll be showers across the north of Northern Ireland, feeding into northern England, central and southern Scotland. Northern Scotland seeing a mostly dry and fine day, and much of the south actually having sunny spells and not too many showers through Wednesday. Decent chance of a dry day here. Still on the cool side for most though, 7 to 9 across the north, 10 to 13 further south.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello there, very good morning. Good to see you. 8 o'clock on the dot on this Tuesday morning, 14th of November. You're tuned into Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And you're very welcome. Here's what's leading the news this morning. Braverman is out, David Cameron is back, and new battle lines are drawn in the party, with the Prime Minister appearing to shun the right. Who now speaks up for them? Olivia Utley has the latest.
Yeah, it's the morning after the night before, and Rishi Sunak is sitting down with his new look cabinet. Some are delighted about the new appointments, but there are certainly others whose noses are a little bit out of joint this morning.
OK, Olivia, thank you. We'll be looking at pictures to see if your noses are out of joint on Rishi Sunak's latest move to hold on to power. Views like this.
It's a mistake.
I think she speaks a lot of sense.
I think it was the right call because her views are a bit too much.
I think it's a bit unfair. I think she does speak for the British people, really.
In other news, the mother of the murder victim, James Bulger, pleads with the parole board to reject his bid for freedom. John Venables' hearing is set to take place later today.
Storm Debbie still causing problems across the country. It's the latest storm to cause flooding, travel disruption, disruption for planes and trains. The Met Office has released a yellow weather warning to cover today.
And with that, Alex Deakin will have your weather.
Storm Debbie may have gone, but we're not done with the downpours or the gusty winds, or indeed the Met Office weather warnings. Join me later for a full forecast.
And here's another yellow warning. Paul Coyte with your sport.
I don't really know how to take that, but I'll take it as a compliment. I think the football world said goodbye to Sir Bobby Charlton yesterday. Emma Raducanu, her comeback's been put on ice, and it's Viva Las Vegas. How about that?
Can't resist.
As I can't help myself, as F1 comes to town.
Yes, comes to town on Sunday. Emma Raducanu, she got an operation on one wrist, two wrists, and one ankle, I think, as well.
Yes, yeah.
So are these the bits that are...
Well, the thing is, she's one operation away from becoming bionic. Did you know that? She's had that many operations.
Becoming what?
Bionic. They can rebuild her. She's going to be like Lindsay Wagner.
Yes.
Going to AI her.
There's one for the kids.
Yeah. $6 million woman.
Was she $6 million? I think she was.
He was. She was cheaper.
I think she might have been slightly cheaper than Steve, yeah.
Oh. And they weren't married in real life or indeed in the series?
No.
No.
He was married to Farrah Fawcett.
He was?
Yeah.
Poor Farrah Fawcett.
What do you mean poor Farrah Fawcett? She was married to the Bionic Man.
She died.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Right, sorry.
You can join in any of our discussions. I used to have a Farrah Fawcett poster in my bedroom
She was
wall.
very pretty.
She was more than pretty. No, you're pretty, Isabel. Farrah Fawcett was...
gorgeous.
Anyway, GBViews at gbnews.com, and you can tweet at GBnews.
It's almost 24 hours, would you believe, since the shock appearance of David Cameron in Downing Street yesterday. And now new battle lines are drawn in the Conservative Party as the fallout from the reshuffle continues.
OK, the sacking of the Home Secretary has fuelled a Conservative civil war as one MP published a formal letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister.
Well, in just a few hours' time, Rishi Sunak's new cabinet will meet. Some familiar and surprising faces will take their positions around the cabinet table.
With former Prime Minister and Remainer David Cameron taking his seat as Foreign Secretary, has Rishi Sunak betrayed the right wing of his party?
Well, here's one man that doesn't think so, the newly appointed Tory party chairman, Richard Holden. This is what he told us earlier on.
We've got a very broad church of a Conservative party, people like me from the north of England, people like David Cameron who've had a huge amount of experience in government from right across the country, and I think it's really good. You can see a strong and united party coming together now for the future.
OK, that's the Conservative Party chairman speaking to us earlier this morning. Olivia Utley is now going to speak to us now from Westminster to find out what the repercussions of all of this is, really, Olivia.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I'd agree with Richard Holden that it is a united party. In fact, I'd say it's anything but. I've been hearing from MPs both last night and this morning who are very divided, both on the removal of Suella Braverman and of the shock arrival of David Cameron. On Suella Braverman, we heard before she was sacked that there are sort of about 50 or 60 Conservative MPs who staunchly backed her and said that they would kick up a real fuss if she were to go. Now, at the moment, it doesn't seem as though there's going to be a pouring in of letters of no confidence in Rishi Sunak. Andrea Jenkins has already sent one, but she is known as a little bit of a troublemaker, and I don't think she's necessarily going to lead a pack. But they are very angry. What I'm hearing at the moment is that they are angry, but they are going to wait until after a general election, and then they could quite possibly rally around her. They are going to be holding Rishi Sunak's feet to the fire and seeing if he's really going to keep speaking for the right of the party. He's put in Esther McVey into cabinet, known as a sort of no-nonsense sort of politician, and she's essentially going to be the Minister for Common Sense, in charge of making sure that wokery doesn't creep back into the civil service, etc. Will that be enough for the right of the party when they've had, for such a long time now, one of the great offices of state filled by a right-winger? It remains to be seen. David Cameron has been equally divisive, and there are lots and lots of MPs who are delighted about his return. They say that the grown-ups are back in the room, that that's exactly what we need, a Conservative Foreign Secretary with the sort of heft and strength and the reputation to carry Britain on the international stage. Meanwhile, there are those who see David Cameron as sort of Remainer king and the king of austerity, two terms which they really do not want to be making a comeback in this final year leading up to the general election. There is a lot of noise about, there is a lot of anger about. One interesting tidbit I heard this morning actually was that Suella Braverman was actually probably for the chop more than a week ago. That piece in the Times might have been the final straw. But if what I'm hearing is right, David Cameron was asked to be Foreign Secretary over a week ago before that piece even appeared. Seems like it seems as though Number 10 was simply fed up with the Home Secretary. That's all the noise floating around Westminster. David Cameron, of course, man of the moment. Here is what he had to say.
The Prime Minister asked me to do this job, and it's a time where we have some daunting challenges as a country. The conflict in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, and of course, I hope that 6 years as Prime Minister, 11 years leading the Conservative Party gives me some useful experience and contacts and relationships and knowledge that I can help the Prime Minister to make sure we build our alliances, we build partnerships with our friends, we deter our enemies, and we keep our country strong. That's why I'm doing the job, and I'm delighted to accept.
Statesmanlike.
Well, you can see that David Cameron there is very keen to talk up his experience, and that's something that Rishi Sunak's going to be talking a lot about in the coming days and weeks as well. Rishi Sunak wants to be focusing on what's happening here at home. He wants to be focusing on the general election, and so he's delegated out this very important role of Foreign Secretary, particularly important at the moment, of course, to someone who he believes has the sort of gravitas to represent Britain completely abroad without his help at home. Now, of course, all the headlines are about David Cameron, this shock return, but there are plenty of other new ministers who will be appearing at the cabinet table this morning. Richard Holden is the new chair of the Conservative Party. We've just heard from him. He was a Conservative Party dog's body, essentially, worked for CCHQ. He was a press officer in the David Cameron days. Laura Trott, the new Chief Secretary to the Treasury, was a special advisor to David Cameron. So it's not just Cameron himself who's back, it's Rishi Sunak very much pivoting back to the David Cameron era. He's appointing people very much in his own image rather than the sort of people who he inherited from Liz Truss. Many will see this as a move to the centre. Does he think that that is the way to win the next election, to target those seats in the south, which are now under threat from the Liberal Democrats? That's the ground that he is clearly trying to grab here with this really, really interesting new cabinet reshuffle.
Yeah. Livia referring to David Cameron's experience, and that experience goes back a long, long way. Matter of fact, it goes back as far as when Isabel was on work experience.
That's not true.
She had her school uniform.
I was a fully fledged
She hung it
presenter,
up.
thank you.
I do like your hair there.
Do you?
When would that be, Isabel?
That was 2015. We'd been doing the show together for about a year. Maybe a bit more.
So it's only 8 years ago.
It was 8 years ago, and Cameron was Prime Minister at the time. He was Prime Minister of a coalition government, and he was very nervous about whether or not he could win another election. And in that studio was just the three of us and Sir Linton Crosby, the Australian electoral genius, as he was deemed at that time. He was in the wings and the floor manager. And he went on, of course, to then win, to his own surprise, I get the feeling, a majority, and perhaps emboldened then by that majority to go ahead with the Brexit referendum, which he then duly lost and resigned almost immediately afterwards. So he was only PM in his own right for 1 year, but leader of the Conservatives for 12 years.
Age is a terrible thing. I mean, Cameron's gone grey. He looks much older and
hair's
haggard.
Receded a bit. I look better than ever.
No, but the serious point is, I do look better than ever.
You look like you're wearing a mask in that picture. I've actually got a mask of your face.
Of my face.
Which I think people wore to my hen party.
See, look, that's a big fat face there.
You look like you're wearing your own mask.
I look as if I've shrunk. No, my face is
Actually,
shrunk.
the person who looks the best in that picture is David Cameron, annoyingly.
Your hair looks very good.
All right, stop going on about it.
I'm just saying.
My hair is a nightmare.
I'm damned if I do. I'm damned if I don't. I'm saying nice things about your hair.
Anymore, does
Is
it?
that your own hair?
Yes, it looks like a wig, though, doesn't it? So much backcombing in there.
Anyway, right, we've had enough of that. That's good. That's good. Right.
Actually, one other curious fact about
that. Now you see the contrast of you then and you now.
I know. Well, it's all these early mornings.
Whereas, look at me. I've just got younger and slimmer and more
No
dashing.
comment. George Clooney. It's my curse in life to be stuck next to you 8 years on.
There are rumours in Westminster that Suella Braverman getting the boot was a bid to end a power struggle between the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister.
Well, what is certain, her controversial comments on not only migrants but pro-Palestinian marches and also on policing divided opinion, and it put her in the firing line of the PM.
So what we've been doing is we've been getting your views. This is from her constituency, which is Farnham.
Fareham.
Is it? Well, there as well.
It's a mistake. I think she speaks a lot of sense, and I think she's speaking for what a lot of the British public are thinking.
I think she's quite viperous and underhand, but she's not stupid, and I think she's doing it for her own reasons, i.e. to have a go at the leadership.
It's been a bit premature, actually, considering what she stood for, being a Brexiteer, and the small boat situation, and the other things that she was involved with, and all the thing about, I believe she was right when she talks about all these protesters, that they are hate crime.
I think it was the right call, because her views are a bit too much.
I think it's a bit unfair. I think she does speak for the British people, really.
It's just a ploy to get to be leader, probably of the opposition, when or if they lose the election. So I think she's just trying to provoke stuff, and I think some of the stuff she said is not nice, and I don't think she really believe in it. I think she's just playing to a certain crowd.
I'm just looking at what you guys have had to say about the reshuffle this morning, and a lot of you unimpressed. Graham says anyone who speaks out gets silenced. So many have in the world. We must have at least one person in this country who'll stand up for all instead of the usual group of has-beens.
Well, who's she standing up for if she's saying that it's a lifestyle choice for people who live on the streets?
Well, I think she'd say she's standing up for people who have shops, whose businesses have people blocking them, and she was trying to help tackle that problem. But, you know, it was the way she approached that, and the talk about I mean, it's horrendous choice of language, but I think that was her point.
Pauline says, that's it. I'm totally finished with the Tories now. Not only have we got an unelected PM, but he's took it on himself to sack Suella. He backstabbed Boris. He got rid of all the original team, and now he's done the same thing to this brilliant lady. So then, Pauline, you've got a dilemma. Who are you going to vote for this time round? That's the question.
Well, Stuart says, I believe there is a large number of the country who, like me, have voted Conservative all their lives and mainly due to fearing a Labour government. But I am seriously contemplating voting Reform, which I know will put Labour into government, but I can no longer give my support to the Conservatives.
Yes, so could Reform, the Reform Party, be the big winners in all of this? And
or the Labour Party, consequently.
Yeah, as Isabel was saying, that there are no winners because if you vote Reform, they'll not be elected. But interesting how the political plates are in a state of movement now at the moment. So it's always great to hear what you think. Thank you very much indeed for that. Keep the views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, in other news this morning, the mother of the murder victim, James Bulger, has begged the parole board overseeing the potential release of her son's killer, John Venables, to reject his bid for freedom.
Let's go to Ray Addison. Ray has more.
Thanks, Eamonn and Isabel. Well, it was February the 12th, 1993, when 2-year-old James Bulger was snatched during a shopping trip to the Strand shopping centre in Merseyside. But 2 days later, his body is found by children on a railway line just 2 miles from the shopping centre. John Venables, who was 10 years old at the time when he and Robert Thompson murdered James, and after 8 years in jail, they were both freed on licence and given lifelong anonymity. But in 2017, John Venables was jailed again after child abuse images were found on his computer. Now, not only could Venables be released, but James's parents have been barred from attending the parole hearing. Instead, Ralph and Denise have issued impact statements begging the parole board to keep their son's killer behind bars. Of course, they're terrified that Venables will reoffend. In her plea to the parole board, James's mother, Denise, said, "Look into my eyes and see what I've had to deal with for 30 years, 3 decades of hell. Make the right decision for everyone and keep my son's killer behind bars." Now, during the parole hearing, the panel will look for any evidence of behavioural change. They're going to be questioning key witnesses, including probation officers, psychiatrists, and, if he's willing to give evidence, John Venables himself. And of course, if they decide that he poses a manageable risk to the public, he could be released before Christmas. Now, of course, it all comes as the Victims and Prisoners Bill is currently going through Parliament. It promises tougher measures aimed at strengthening the parole system and making public protection the top priority in deciding which prisoners are safe for release. It will also give ministers greater oversight and the power to overturn release decisions for the most serious offenders.
Thanks, Ray. Weather warnings are in place right across the country after Storm Debbie wreaked a lot of problems yesterday, with heavy rain and winds set to continue. The Met Office warning of delays to train services and road closures continuing.
Well, our reporter Jeff Moody's out and about and joins us this morning with an update on how we're doing across the UK.
Good morning. Well, Storm Debbie has passed, really. It's headed out into the North Sea fairly early on, but it did wreak a certain amount of havoc overnight, particularly in parts of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and a little bit in North Wales too. That's where it was worst hit, with winds getting up to around 77 miles per hour. We're not hearing any reports of significant injury. One woman was taken to hospital in Limerick because of she was hit by flying debris, but she's not thought to be in a serious situation. There were 100,000 homes that had lost power overnight in Ireland. Now that's only 3,000. Most of those homes have now been, the power has now been restored. And now this morning, the problem is along the south coast of England, where there's still a weather warning in place. It's only a yellow weather warning, but it's for torrential rain, thunderstorms too. We did get a crack of lightning here about half an hour ago. But yes, the usual warnings are out in place. You know, be very careful if you're on rural roads, watch out for trees falling down, and try and stay away from coastal roads where you could see some very large waves. But apart from that, it looks as though the storm has passed pretty much uneventfully overnight.
Jeff, thanks very much indeed. It is amazing how, when all those big puddles form and the overflows, and then within a few hours they disappear.
Yeah,
again.
but that water table staying dangerously topped up.
Very
so
high.
Problem's not all gone. Alex Deakin has your forecast. You don't want to miss it.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Debbie may have cleared away, but there's still going to be plenty of downpours around today, and gusty winds, particularly already across the southwest of England. Narrow band of very heavy rain is working across southern counties of England. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, flashes of lightning, rumbles of thunder and blustery wind. The Met Office do have a yellow warning in place for those thundery showers. Elsewhere, there'll be quite a few showers through the day, but some sunny spells over the Midlands, Wales, parts of East Anglia as well. In the sunshine, we might squeak into the teens, but further north, lots of showers and lots of cloud, feeling fairly chilly. Temperatures 9 to 11 Celsius at best. More showers to come this evening as well for central Scotland, feeding into Northern Ireland. Frequent heavy showers here and across northern England. Further south, well, a few, particularly in the southwest, but many places will be dry and largely clear as well. Some clearer skies and lighter winds in northern Scotland could allow temperatures to get down to freezing, but for for most will be in single figures, 6 to 8 Celsius in most towns and cities. Bit of a north-south split then to start tomorrow. There'll be showers across the north of Northern Ireland, feeding into northern England, central and southern Scotland. Northern Scotland seeing a mostly dry and fine day, and much of the south actually having sunny spells and not too many showers through Wednesday. Decent chance of a dry day here. Still on the cool side for most though, 7 to 9 across the north, 10 to 13 further south.
So the National Trust, right, so it's a national organisation, but it appears it ignores Christmas. So it ignores Christmas, but it marks that it remembers Eid.
Which is a celebration at the end of Ramadan. Yes, let us know your views on that. Perhaps we should set Esther McVeigh onto that job.
Yes, the Minister of Woke. So anyway, do you feel you need representation? Do you think it's disappointing that in a Christian country they can't acknowledge the importance of festivals like Christmas or Easter? That's the National Trust for you. What do you want to say to them back after this?
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, wait till you hear this, right? Christian holidays do not feature in the National Trust's calendar, right? This is called an inclusion calendar. And basically, and they do include, they have Eid there, they have Diwali in there, so they recognise Muslim and Hindu religious festivals, but there's no Easter, there's no Christmas, there's nothing. The question is, why?
Very big question, that. The issue was raised by a volunteer amid angry scenes at its annual meeting, where the Trust was accused of rigging an election to get favoured candidates voted in.
Well, today we're asking the question, has the National Trust gone woke? Well, if they have, they'll go to hell, won't they? Really? They will. They will, if it's a sin in the eyes of God, and if they're not going to mark Christmas or
Maybe they don't
Easter.
believe in God.
Well, God will believe in them. That's the question. And they'll be judged come the end of the world, when people rise from the dead, when St. Gabriel blows his horn.
St. Peter will not look kindly at the gates
He
of
will
heaven,
not.
pearly
He will
gates.
not do all that.
Have we got a guest on this?
We have. Graham Nichols.
Luckily, we've got it in our notes. Graham Nichols, Director of Affinity Gospel Churches. Good morning to you. Look, it's a shame, isn't it, to elbow out...
It's more than a shame. It's ridiculous.
The most recent census says we're not a Christian country anymore.
Well, all the institutions are Christian.
I'm not disagreeing.
The monarchy's Christian, Parliament's Christian. So stop making excuses for them. It's wrong. It's just wrong, Graham. I'm sorry.
I agree with you. I don't think it's right. I think, in a way, the fact that we're not a Christian country, in a way, makes it even more compelling that we should be included on a calendar like this, because across the world, Christians are persecuted. And in this country, we're not the majority. So it's quite good to remind people of our Christian heritage. And lots of people want to celebrate that. I mean, I think there's a more general point about the direction of the National Trust away from simply being a repository for lots of buildings and lots of land that has historical significance, through to actually peddling an ideology, which is, I think the calendar is just all part of that. And I think there's also a more general point about, can we really remember all these minority groups? It gets a bit confusing, and I think it flattens it all out so they all become meaningless, where there's a day for this and a month for this and another day for this, and no one can really keep up with it all. But particularly for religious festivals, why wouldn't you include Christmas? There's lots of people who from other religions who'd at least be interested. They'd be staggered, I think, that the Christian festivals are not on there. And I did see a calendar from the Association of
My point, Graham, would be, what's the harm in it? If you're going to recognise Eid or Diwali, and, you know, Isabel's saying that Christianity is not the majority religion, but... is anything the majority religion, or are these just aggregate scores? Are they just all added up and then together they are more than Christianity?
I don't know how they got to that conclusion. Maybe they thought it's obvious when Christmas and Easter is, and perhaps the other things are not obvious. But I think it's a matter of respect, isn't it? That if you're going to respect the other religions, you want to respect Christianity, and include them in your calendar.
And, you know, this is the thing, it's a heritage organisation, and it's like they're just ignoring the heritage of most... You know, traditionally, the heritage of British people may not be the majority anymore, but, you know, go back 100 years in time, and it would have been. Most of the historic buildings that they represent would have been inhabited by Christians, so just to elbow them out doesn't seem to make any sense. But we were talking a little bit earlier about how this is creeping in all over the place, and I was reflecting on the primary school that my children used to go to, and not one Christmas carol, no mention of Jesus around Christmas time, and yet detailed homework set about Diwali. Now, we had Hindu children in the class. I welcome education, understanding, teaching children about each other and tolerance and all of those things, but at the expense of Christianity always.
Yeah, I think there's a strange embarrassment about our Christian heritage, which is difficult to fathom, because I think, just practically speaking, lots of our laws and institutions are based on our Judeo-Christian heritage. But I think also our morality is based on Christian morality. So lots of things we argue about, may disagree about the outworking of them, even things that the church is disagreeing with itself about, are to do with the fact that we think there is right and wrong, and that morality is based on Christian morality. And, you know, particularly in the Western world, Christian teaching and influence So to try and airbrush that out seems ridiculous, and it's taking away the root, and eventually you lose the fruit.
Well, Graham, that's given us a lot to think about there. Graham is the director of an organisation called Affinity Gospel Churches.
I'm just trying to read emails coming in, and you can just see my inbox. I can hardly read it because it's just exploding.
Stay there, Graham. Don't go away.
I just want to read a few. Bear in mind, I'm reading these for the first time live on air, so you never quite know what you're going to get. I suggest members do what I've done, cancel the membership. Vote with your feet. James McBride, I was in Starbucks in Leamington recently. It was all merry this holiday, that festive, that. The word Christmas was conspicuously absent everywhere. Meanwhile, Channel 4 pushing Diwali all the time. What's going on?
Yes.
And I'll just read this one quickly. This is from Sharon in Bradford. I totally agree with you, Eamonn. Same old Christians, again ignored, but dare say anything about Muslims and all hell will be let loose. Shame. Christmas is about Christ.
On the subject of hell, you see, Graham, I'd like to know what the embarrassment is. What is this embarrassment amongst big institutions, publications, broadcasters, commercial stores in this country? Why is Christianity deemed toxic, yet other religions wouldn't be deemed toxic?
I don't really know. Is it like a sort of national teenage rebellion against the parents or something, where you kind of know that they're good, but you kind of want to rebel? I don't really understand it. I mean, obviously there are values that have changed in culture that are perhaps less Christian than they were, so maybe it's a reaction against that. But I don't really understand it, and I think it's not useful to cut off the root of our Christian heritage and to ignore it, and I think eventually it won't lead anywhere good.
Thank you.
But in the end, we're going to celebrate Christmas and enjoy it and talk about the birth of Jesus, the Saviour of the world. So we're going to have fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Graham. You see, I think people, even if they say they don't identify with being Christian or whatever, or they don't consider themselves full-time Christians, I think there are certain feasts throughout the year, Christmas being the obvious example, Easter being another one, where people are quite happy to become a little bit Christian.
Yeah. That's fine. If that's the only little nugget they get of it, it's better than nothing.
But I'm saying, for the National Trust, what of all the things the man or woman that runs the National Trust has to worry about when they wake up on a Monday morning, why do they think we've got to cancel Christmas? There can be no reference to Christmas here. The Grinch who stole Christmas. Why do we have... They've got all these nice properties that would look well with wreaths and things outside them that all look very good. They'll be happy to take your money when you're doing all that. But why are they so frightened of Christmas?
Let's lay down the gauntlet and invite them on. You'd be so welcome. Please do come in, and if you feel we're not representing your position on all of this, let us know, give you your right of reply. But as I say, a lot of GB News viewers and listeners thinking they are going to cancel their membership because why would you do that?
You see, you take that song,
Christmas.
You take the Band-Aid song, right? It's Christmas time, there's no need to be afraid, all that sort of thing. That relies on a Christian ethos of giving and charity and playing. So when organisations want your money and they want you to conform,
comes from a charitable.
Yeah, they'll play that up, and when they don't, and I just don't know what the fear is. But also, I just find it hilariously funny that whatever Diwali is, I'm sure it's lovely and gorgeous and fantastic, and good luck to you if you're celebrating it. But Channel 4 basically wet their pants in trying to say this is the most wonderful time of the year. You know, there's that song about Christmas. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Well, now we've got Eid. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And it may well be. But why are they so desperate to promote Eid? Over to you.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Well, on that note, let's invite Paul Coit. You might have a few on this, or he may want to swerve this one, kick this one.
Oh, you bring me in now, don't you?
No, stay out of it.
Change the topic. What have you got for us?
I have... Well, we should talk about Sir Bobby Charlton. Last chance to talk about that. The funeral was yesterday. The great and the good of Manchester. Everybody was there. All the captains were there. Executives, the family, obviously. There we are. Prince William was there, as we can see, as the head of the FA, as everybody arriving there at the cathedral. Some nice things that I saw. Bobby Charlton's grandson, the spoken. You often don't hear about the man because we talk about everything he did in football, but he would talk about how his granddad made up stories and characters, and even in his 70s he went sledging with them, so just a regular granddad. But the former Chief Executive David Gill said some great words about Sir Bobby. He said, in his quiet way, Bobby helped me learn about the game, how to behave in victory, and more importantly, in defeat. Outwardly polite, inwardly disappointed. You could be a superstar and a fierce competitor while still being a gentleman, and never sent off in his career.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Not enough gentlemen.
I thought it was very nice, and Sir Bobby was laid to rest yesterday. I'll move to a little tennis. Emma Raducanu.
The bionic woman.
The bionic woman, Emma Raducanu. It was her birthday yesterday. Do you know how old Emma Raducanu? I can't even say it. Emma Raducanu is 22. What would you go with?
Oh no, maybe younger. 20.
22. Yeah.
21. She's 21. Former
she was doing
US
levels a minute ago, wasn't she?
I know, but former US champion, and after that, and of course, it started with Wimbledon, and then she pulled out of Wimbledon, and then won the US Open in 2021, and it's just been a disaster for her.
So many gratuitous shot there, isn't it?
It is. It's slightly. Well, I was looking at the ball in her pocket there, but there we are.
Very short shorts.
There's Emma, and she's delayed her return. She was supposed to play in Macau at the start of December. And there's so many things that seem to have gone wrong, not only with injuries, as Eamonn mentioned earlier, the 2 wrist injuries and a foot injury and everything, and she's had 5 coaches in less than 2 years, so she hasn't played since April, and she's now 289 in the world, which is interesting because, Isabel, you're 310 in the world, aren't you?
Yeah.
So,
in my dream.
So very soon, if you just keep playing, you'll probably be above her. But where it's going to go with Emma, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Is she going to come back? Is it going to work out?
Doesn't look good. But,
it really doesn't.
We haven't got any other
I know.
sort of pin-up girls for tennis yet.
Unfortunately. Well, there's a few, but won what she won. One final thing, Las Vegas Grand Prix, which happens this weekend. Huge disruption to the city because it's all being used right in the middle of the city. Like, they're going to race right down the Strip in Vegas. Yeah. So it is going to be a huge, huge event. And I don't think we're going to get Lewis Hamilton, though, dancing with Anne Margaret, as Elvis did in Viva Las Vegas. I don't think that's likely to happen.
Margaret's 98.
You don't think?
Don't think that's.
Oh, I think
but
she
also,
can still move.
Lewis isn't as fun as Elvis. Let's be honest.
I don't think so. But we do have a picture, it's a little throwback of Elvis racing in Viva Las Vegas. And we got the picture of the King there. I hope we do, because his name was Lucky Jackson. Now look at that. Now that is a racing driver.
Gorgeous in crazy orange goggles.
Even in the actually, I thought that was Eamonn for a moment there, but no, I could just.
I was more Elvis in his Vegas years. When he was in
the white rhinestone suit.
Yes.
Yeah, the peacock suit.
Yeah.
1964.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely. Good memories there. Thank you, and looking ahead to the Las Vegas Grand Prix on Sunday.
Right, stay with us. We're asking, does the law around marches need to be toughened? We'll be discussing that and more in Headline Makers next.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Oh, the National Trust story's got everybody going, and we're going to talk about it in Headline Makers in just a moment, but should we read some of these views, Eamonn?
Yeah.
Martin says, I'm a member of many, many years. I've slowly watched the woke agenda of those who run it. I think the time has come to cancel my membership. Enough is enough. And that's pretty much the thread of it all. Lisa says, it's easy, boycott them. Unless people start taking a harder line, the evaporation of our culture will become the norm.
Well, we've got Norman Baker and Baroness Claire Fox to discuss that story and others. And Claire, if we begin with you, with your take on this, my point is, what harm does it do to recognise Christmas on a calendar? Why would you go out of your way to exclude Christmas from the calendar?
I think that's the question, isn't it? Why would you go out of your way to exclude it? Who do they think they're appealing to? Now, I think what we have seen over a period of time is a number of UK institutions who completely, presumably thinking they're doing the right thing about equality, diversity and inclusion, these EDI agendas, have convinced themselves that anything to do with British culture, Christianity is oddly British, Western culture will alienate people who are not from that background. Well, of course, that's insulting. I mean, the idea that, your Muslim neighbours on one side or your Sikh neighbours on the other, I'm referring to myself now, would be standing around going, Christmas on a National Trust calendar? Outrageous, I'm insulted, this is an attack on my culture. However, on a more serious point, we've seen what happens when you get to a situation where you're so frightened to assert what British culture is, that you get into a situation where I'm afraid we have seen a refusal or a real reluctance to challenge, for example, the rise of Islamism. So to give an example, I once gave a talk in a sixth form college and the young students were telling me that 9/11 was a Jewish plot. And I argued against them, and obviously, and the head of sixth form congratulated me on my bravery for taking it on. He's had a number of outside speakers who didn't do that when the kids had said similar things. This is because we seem to be frightened we'll be accused of bigotry.
Well, look, I mean, I entirely agree that I've got Muslim friends who are perfectly happy with Christmas being Christmas. I mean, why wouldn't they be? It's just a time, as far as I'm concerned, for a break. So there's a complete overreaction. But what worries me about the National Trust thing is not the exclusion of Christmas particularly, but it's the inclusion of other things like Diwali. You either have none of them in there or you have all of them in there. You can't pick and choose.
Yeah. Well, on that
like
note...
Quality Street at Christmas.
Well, yes, we do pick and choose Quality Street, don't we?
Yes.
I'll have the triangular green ones, please.
OK.
It leaves me to another story. We've talked... Should we skip the cabinet reshuffle? We've talked a lot about it, or do you guys feel strongly want to talk about it? I mean, I was just going to say this is a perfect issue for Esther McVeigh to tackle now that she's been given a cabinet position of common sense and anti-woke,
yes.
Norman.
I mean, she might be very effective in that, or she might be just sidelined. Time will tell on that. But I do want to talk about one aspect of the reshuffle, which you haven't touched on, which is the link between David Cameron and China. And I on earlier in the programme, I welcomed David Cameron's appointment. But there is an issue, because when he left office in 2016, he'd ended other things, of course, and he's built up this collection of bits and pieces which he has to now to deal with. Now he's in office again. And one of them is the fact that he's been particularly pro-China. He was appointed as vice chair of the UK, of the China-UK Investment Fund, which was also questioned by Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee. And now, of course, he's dealing with China as Foreign Secretary. So he's got to unwind that. So the question is he going to disavow what he's been doing, or is he going to somehow incorporate it into British policy?
Well, he has already relinquished all of his roles as of yesterday, hasn't he, since he became Lord and the Foreign Secretary.
So you can't relinquish
and whilst
your
he
views.
was an elected leader and then Prime Minister, he presided over, wasn't it, the Golden Era, when they became friendlier than ever with China, and that was with a mandate. So he could probably argue that, you know, perhaps things have changed, relations with China have changed in recent years, and therefore he maybe needs to change his tune.
He can reinvent himself, but I mean, there is an issue with what he's said and what he's done. And I know from my time in government, I mean, he and George Osborne were unhealthily pro-China. What happened was that the Dalai Lama came across to visit the UK, and he met with both David Cameron and Nick Clegg. China then sent the UK into cold storage and wouldn't meet ministers for a while. Curious enough, I was the first minister to go to China after that, in defrosting. But, I mean, they went overboard, and we've now had to unwind that because China was given all sorts of roles with the British nuclear industry, for example, which it shouldn't have been given, and it was a danger to security, in my view. So he was associated with that very closely.
So is the position that we just don't do business with China, or that you have someone like Cameron who says to China, look, guys, you're going to have to wise up, you're going to have to do things more above board, and we can do some sort of business with you?
You've got to do business with China because of the second biggest power in the world, but you've got to also do it with your eyes open and not give them access to, for example, our nuclear industry. You've also got to maintain the right to raise the grotesque human rights abuses which occur in that country.
Yeah.
OK, well, I mean, you expressed your thoughts about his foreign policy experience in relation to Libya and the European Union as well earlier on, so we won't go over the same ground. But let's talk about one of the reasons, possibly, that he's got the job, and this was the controversy surrounding the marches over the weekend, which Suella Braverman was involved in. And well, the Armed Forces Minister James Heapy's been saying that Rishi Sunak is considering giving police more powers to crack down on them, and this is in the Daily Mail.
Yeah, it's also in The Guardian, and it's actually being aired quite regularly. So I've made it clear that I find the sentiments of those demonstrations, even if some people are naively thinking that these are calls for peace, I think that it's very misplaced. And that what happened on October the 7th was an anti-Jewish pogrom, and we are taking on ISIS-like regime in terms of Hamas, who started this, and so on and so forth. Right. Despite all that, and despite my concern about anti-Semitism growing on the streets, I do not think we should ban these demonstrations. I am absolutely convinced that what we need to do is to hold firm on those, you know, liberal Enlightenment values around freedom and free speech. And funnily enough, I mean, if anything, I'm glad that we can see it. Right? If there's depths of anti-Semitism that have been kind of ruminating and festering, and now we can see it on the streets. Banning it doesn't make it go away. And I remember when, after 7/7, NUS and student unions banned Hizb ut-Tahrir off campus. Well, Hizb ut-Tahrir didn't go away. They just relabelled. It also turned them into kind of free speech martyrs, by the way. And so everything about it doesn't work. We also, what's the kind of least worst experience here? We need free speech in order to combat it. We should all be very concerned that so many young people don't even recognise anti-Semitism when they see it. They're kind of quiet. No, they don't really, but they're also like, well, why is that anti-Semitic? I've got nothing, what? And then when you sort of say about the Holocaust, and they go, yeah, but, So all of these things require all of us who understand the significance of the rise of the explicit anti-Semitism on our streets to have more speech to combat it. And I think that if Hamas is allowed to force free societies to be less free, they will have created, the very mayhem that we want them not to do. We always said we wouldn't let ISIS do that. I don't think we should. And I think this is a misstep and trying to cheat to deal with a problem.
Well, it'll be a first big challenge for Cleverly in the new role as Home Secretary.
No, Norman, I'm not a coffee drinker, but when people say to me, I'm just calling into wherever to get a coffee and I'll have 2 shots of whatever the heck in it and something else, but it all sounds syrupy and whatever. What would you get, Isabel, in a coffee? Would just 2 shots of...
I like an Americano and I don't like any of the syrups, but I tend not to like any of the shops that they're referencing here. But I can see how if you went in and ordered a hazelnut skinny latte, for example, you'd end up probably with your daily calories in 1 cup, Norman.
Yeah, this is the point, that people that are ordering drinks which they aren't aware are full of sugar. And according to this piece in The Sun, 1/3 of drinks from coffee shops contain more sugar than the entire daily recommended...
Are you a coffee drinker?
I am, but I wouldn't have any of these things.
You wouldn't have any of these?
No, absolutely not, no. I mean, my coffee is just old-fashioned coffee. Before we had all these lattes and mochas and everything else, we had coffee.
Yeah, just a white coffee.
And you went in a coffee, and you had a bit of coffee, and you had some hot water and some milk, and that was it.
So this is more like a milkshake or...
It is, it's just misleading. And they
supersise American portions, people walking around with these... Other brands are available, but, a Starbucks that's sort of... I don't know how to describe it. Bigger than a pint.
Yes.
A litre.
No,
can I just say, first of all, you don't have to go into the coffee shops. You can just come and do the paper review on GB News. I mean, I've had more sugar intake from my coffees this morning than any...
Have you?
Yeah, I love coffees.
Drinking?
I think I'm my third latte.
Oh, right.
Right. What I'd say is that I think people probably know that there's lots of sugar in it and love it. I do. When I go for one of these coffees. And I appreciate that, there's certain things that you shouldn't do, but, that's my sugar intake.
Would that be your breakfast, a sugary coffee? Some people substitute food for sort of...
Yes, probably it would be. But all I'm saying is I don't want to over-panic about these things. They're one of the great delights of life, which is why so many people...
Not if they're killing you.
But also, why is it that
everything's killing me.
Italy, you go and your coffee is short and it's this size, or France, and they delight and languish and enjoy and relish over their coffee.
They do.
Except it doesn't make them fat in the process.
That's right. Look, sugar is... we all like sugar. I like sugar in milk chocolate, as a matter of fact. But, I mean, sugar is a serious health issue. And actually, one of the interesting things from the reshuffle yesterday, going back to that, if I may, is we've now got Victoria Atkins as the new Secretary of State for Health. Well, her husband, Paul Kenward, is the chief executive of one of the world's biggest sugar companies.
Right, but she's type 1 diabetic.
Yes.
I think she's very aware of sugar.
No, she is. But I think the interesting point there is whether or not a partner's activity should be taken into account when someone's appointed to a particular job.
What do you think?
I think probably not. But, I mean, I think there are legitimate questions to ask, but you have to be very careful what you do.
When she becomes Home Secretary and her husband's fronting a breakfast news channel?
Well, indeed.
Question. Anyway, right, where should we go from here? Oh, let's go to the jungle, shall we? We've only got 25 seconds, Norman, but Nigel Farage says he's afraid of...
He's afraid of losing popularity and afraid of losing votes.
I read he was afraid of snakes, and I'd have thought being a politician, you get pretty used to lots of those.
We get used to knives in the back, certainly. I don't know about snakes.
I don't think you should tell them what you're afraid of, because they'll just make sure that you do
You're
those.
very, very
Make
wise.
sure you get those, yeah, very good. Norman Baker, thank you very much indeed. Baroness Claire Fox, really appreciate it. The guys, no, you're not going to be back again. That's you for the morning.
it.
And we have enjoyed that very, very much. Thank you, guys. I don't think you'll enjoy the weather. Let's find out.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Debbie may have cleared away, but there's still going to be plenty of downpours around today and gusty winds, particularly already across the southwest of England. Narrow band of very heavy rain is working across southern counties of England. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, flashes of lightning, rumbles of thunder and blustery wind. The Met Office do have a yellow warning in place for those thundery showers. Elsewhere, there'll be quite a few showers through the day, but some sunny spells over the Midlands, Wales, parts of East Anglia as well. In the sunshine, we might squeak into the teens, but further north, lots of showers and lots of cloud, feeling fairly chilly. Temperatures 9 to 11 Celsius at best. More showers to come this evening as well for central Scotland, feeding into Northern Ireland. Frequent heavy showers here and across northern England. Further south, well, a few, particularly in the southwest, but many places will be dry and largely clear as well. Some clearer skies and lighter winds in northern Scotland could allow temperatures to get down to freezing, but for most will be in single figures, 6 to 8 Celsius in most towns and cities. Bit of a north-south split then to start tomorrow. There'll be showers across the north of Northern Ireland, feeding into northern England, central and southern Scotland. Northern Scotland seeing a mostly dry and fine day, and much of the south actually having sunny spells and not too many showers through Wednesday. Decent chance of a dry day here. Still on the cool side for most though, 7 to 9 across the north, 10 to 13 further south.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good to see you. It's 9 o'clock. It's the 14th of November. It's Tuesday morning. Welcome to our little programme as we round off what we've been covering in this last half hour. Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel, Webster here.
Well, Suella Braverman is out and David Cameron has made a comeback, and we've been asking this morning, is it enough to end a Tory civil war? Olivia Utley's in Westminster for GB News.
Yeah, it's the morning after the night before today, and in half an hour's time, that new look cabinet will be sitting down for their first meeting, headed up by Rishi Sunak. Lots of people are feeling very happy about the new appointments, others not so much.
Thank you, Olivia. Earlier on the programme, we spoke to the brand new Tory party chairman, Richard Holden, about Rishi Sunak's reshuffle. This is what he had to say.
We've got a very broad church of a Conservative party, people like me from the north of England, people like David Cameron who've had a huge amount of experience in government.
In other news this morning, the mother of the murder victim, James Bulger, pleads with the parole board to reject his bid for freedom. John Venables' hearing is set to take place later today.
The latest storm still causing issues across the country. We've been hearing about flooding and travel disruption for many of you. Alex Deakin, the latest on that.
Storm Debbie may have gone, but we're not done with the downpours or the gusty winds, or indeed the Met Office weather warnings. Join me later for a full forecast.
And
it was scary, wasn't it, yesterday coming in and the rain?
Horrible.
And the storm.
And actually, there was a tree down out where I live, so I'm not surprised at all. And then the wind really picked up in the afternoon.
Yes, it did.
Which was, you know, extra fun.
And when you were going through puddles, did you worry that you wouldn't come out of puddles?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, my son was telling me that last night he was sitting on YouTube or Instagram or something watching people getting stuck in the water. He said it was quite funny. You know, the people with
epic fails.
The people with the big 4x4s, a lot of them were getting stuck, whether these were electric vehicles or not, I'm not sure. And then some of the smallest vehicles were just going right through, yeah.
I was telling you the other day, a couple of weeks ago, my brother was in a fire engine and the fire engine got stuck in the floodwater and then a tractor had to pull the fire engine out, so sometimes
at least somebody's there to help you. Have you got a tale to tell? You can join in any of our discussions. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com or you can tweet
at GB News.
Well, a few bloody noses from yesterday's new battle lines being drawn up in the Tory party. The Prime Minister's cabinet reshuffle going through. The headline in that, the sacking of the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman.
Yes, and it's fuelled reports, allegations of possibly a big rift within the Tory party. One MP has published a formal letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister.
So we can tell you that within the next half hour, the new cabinet will meet and there will be some familiar and some not so familiar faces taking their positions around the cabinet table.
But with the former Prime Minister and Remainer David Cameron taking his seat as Foreign Secretary, has Rishi Sunak betrayed the right wing of his party? Well, one man that doesn't think so is the newly appointed Tory party chairman. He says he's from the right of the party, Richard Holden. This is what he told us earlier this morning.
We've got a very broad church of a Conservative party. People like me from the north of England, people like David Cameron, who've had a huge amount of experience in government from right across the country. And I think it's really good. You can see a strong and united party coming together now for the future.
Now, we're going to go to Olivia Utley, our political correspondent, who's been working very hard today. So we know what's happened, Olivia. What's likely to happen? Who's going to be around that table? And what is the balance or the frictions likely to be like?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't particularly agree with Richard Holden that we're seeing a new era of a united Conservative Party. If anything, it seems as though the Conservative Party is more divided than ever before. One letter of no confidence in Rishi Sunak has already gone in from a Suella Braverman supporter, Andrea Jenkins, who is furious by her removal and does not like the idea of David Cameron, a Remainer, and the sort of architect of austerity coming back into government. That said, this morning, I think that the vibe around the cabinet table will be pretty upbeat. It's not just David Cameron who's made a reappearance in the cabinet. This reshuffle represents a real shift in Rishi Sunak's sort of priorities and his outlook from the right of the party to the left of the party. When he took over from Liz Truss in that very tumultuous time for the Conservative Party, he was obliged to bring in some really right of centre Conservative politicians into his top team to sort of keep that very delicate, precarious balance going. He wasn't particularly popular within the broader Conservative Party membership, and he had to show that he could throw some red meat to those people, if you like, bring in some of those Trussite and Johnsonite supporters to shore up his cabinet. Now, over a year on, he feels able to start getting rid of some of those people and start moving in people more in his own image. So we've got David Cameron, of course, who is taking all the headlines. We've also got Victoria Atkins, who's the new health secretary. Interesting little tidbit, her husband is the managing director of British Sugar. Bit of a conflict of interest, I'd say there, but let's see how that one plays out. We've also got Laura Trott as the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Now, Trott was a very close advisor to David Cameron himself back in the day. So her promotion to this very important job and cabinet job around the cabinet table shows that this isn't simply a question of Rishi Sunak wanting someone with experience in the role of Foreign Secretary, though that certainly is part of it. It is reflective of a change in his priorities. Now, he would say that actually why he was getting, I mean, he hasn't said this yet and we won't expect him to, but reading between the lines, what he feels is that Suella Braverman, although he did agree with her on a lot of her politics, was simply becoming a bit of a liability. Even before she wrote that piece in the Times, it's rumoured that Rishi Sunak was already keen to get rid of her. Apparently, David Cameron was asked to be Foreign Secretary last week before that Times article even came out. That's all the noise circling around in Westminster today. David Cameron himself did his first ever interview as the Foreign Secretary last night. Let's hear what the man himself had to say.
The Prime Minister asked me to do this job, and it's a time where we have some daunting challenges as a country, the conflict in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, and of course I hope that 6 years as Prime Minister, 11 years leading the Conservative Party gives me some useful experience and contacts and relationships and knowledge that I can help the Prime Minister to make sure we build our alliances, we build partnerships with our friends, we deter our enemies, and we keep our country strong. That's why I'm doing the job, and I'm delighted to accept.
Now, as I say, I think generally there will be a pretty positive vibe around the cabinet table. The people who Rishi Sunak has brought in have deliberately been arranged that way because he assumes that they're going to get on well. But Eamonn, you talked about tensions, and there certainly will be some tensions around that table this morning. When Rishi Sunak just last month decided to scrap that leg of HS2 at the Manchester conference, David Cameron tweeted out saying that he believed it was the wrong decision. When asked about that yesterday, he said that yes, he thinks that some specific decisions were wrong, but on the whole, he thinks that Rishi Sunak has been a good Prime Minister and he's willing to engage in collective responsibility. But surely there's going to be some tension there. Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, who one would assume had something to do with the decision to scrap HS2, is a former close ally of David Cameron and has talked warmly about his arrival back into government. But that's a pretty big difference. HS2 was a huge policy from the Cameron era, which has now been shelved by the Rishi Sunak government. And there are plenty of other policy decisions too, which have gone down, been swept under the rug in the 8 years since David Cameron left government. So there will be plenty of tensions round that table this morning, but the Conservative government is very, very aware that it is really, really behind in the polls. So all of these tensions will probably be kept under wraps for the public eye, and we will, I expect, see a display of real unity in the next days and weeks.
Thanks, Olivia.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall, but will it all work? That's the big question. Well, let's travel now to the West Midlands. Our reporter Jack Carson is in Burslem. That's a former Red Wall seat that turned Tory in 2019. So, Jack, I'm trying to get a sense from you, really, whether or not you think the hiring of somebody like Cameron, a staunch Remainer, conceded sort of more from the centre of the party, will he change the way the vote goes at the next election, do you think?
Well, that's the big test, really, for the Conservatives here, of course, leading up to that next election next year, about whether, as you say, the inclusion. You've got a Chancellor in Jeremy Hunt, who, of course, was backing the Remain campaign. You've now got a Foreign Secretary in David Cameron, who was backing the Remain campaign. So here in Stoke-on-Trent North, this constituency, where it was more than a 65% vote for Leave, it is going to be a test for people here, whether that really sticks and whether Rishi Sunak can still win here, because of course since this seat was created it had been Labour. It was only 2019 and the MP here, Jonathan Gullis, that turned this former stronghold for Labour blue. And of course Rishi Sunak saying yesterday after that reshuffle that he was building a united team ready to deliver for the country on those long-term decisions. But Labour already, of course, hitting back. Pat McFadden took aim of that shake-up. He said he called David Cameron was part of a failed status. He said he's bringing him back as his life raft, of course, and he said this puts to bed the Prime Minister's laughable claim to offer change after 13 years of Tory failure. Of course, Labour going into that next election will want to be the party for change. They'll want to be showing areas like this that they can win them back, and of course win back that trust as well. I did speak to one lady who was waiting for the bus this morning about how she feels coming up to the next election and whether this reshuffle and Rishi Sunak still has it in him to win that election.
Think Rishi Sunak can still win in places like here?
Rishi Sunak? I don't think so.
Which way would you vote next time?
I don't know. Maybe Labour.
Probably do. I think a lot of people here probably do not necessarily not know where maybe they are voting. They're probably still going between the two parties as well. But of course, many One Nation MPs will, of course, be happy about the return of David Cameron. But in places like here, we're going to be testing throughout the day whether that really is the case.
Cheers, Jack. Thank you very much indeed. Listening to you, we now have the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. We say good morning to Darren Jones with this one. Darren, everybody's having a chuckle about the Conservatives being the party of change. Were you chuckling?
Yes, quite frankly. But also, look, here in Westminster, we always love the who's up, who's down, who's back stories. But what really matters is whether the Conservative Party its performance is going to improve. For people at home, they will know that the economy is heading in the wrong direction, that the cost of living is an ongoing problem for them, that the Tories crashed the economy last year, resulting in higher mortgage payments, that our public services are in crisis, and I'm not sure they really mind who's around the cabinet table. They just want a Conservative Party that will hopefully get a grip of the country again, which, unfortunately, based on the past 13 years, I don't suspect they will.
Though, I mean, just a few days ago at the weekend, Salvation did this poll. They said that if Labour went to if there was an election today, Sir Keir Starmer will get a bigger landslide than Tony Blair got in 1997. Does the fact, though, that David Cameron is back in one of the top offices of state change that? You know, he's an electoral winner. He's had 2 big successes in the past.
Well, that's for the voters to decide, but my observation would be that having David Cameron as Foreign Secretary doesn't solve Rishi Sunak's problems. In fact, it's quite odd to me that Rishi Sunak has had to look to the past to try to bring back a quote-unquote grown-up to help get a control of the Conservative Party and its performance in the country. If Rishi Sunak was a good enough Prime Minister, no, but my point still stands. If Rishi Sunak was a good enough Prime Minister, he would be able to get a grip of this, and he's failed to do so.
Well, I believe it's been done by Labour in the past. Lord Mandelson, Lord Adonis both brought in not MPs at the time, so it's an allegation you can lay to your previous leaders as well.
Yeah, and look how that worked out. We lost the election in 2010. What really matters is whether the Conservative Party's performance is going to improve. And based on Rishi Sunak's speech at Conservative Party conference, based on his King's speech, based on what we're expecting in the autumn statement next week from Jeremy Hunt, I just don't think that's the case.
Darren, there must be so much of you, if you were to win the election, that is excited about what you would get control of. And as, at the moment, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, what, though, is your fear of what you will inherit?
Well, look, we're not taking any of the poll leads with any sense of complacency. We know that we have a huge amount of work to do in a very high number of constituencies across the country, in every breadth and every corner of the country, to persuade people to vote for us at the next election. And we're going to work really hard to try to win the trust of the British people when that election comes. But look, you're right. The inheritance that we would have if we were to win the next election is pretty daunting. I mean, the Conservatives' failure over the last 13 years is of a scale, I think, it's uncomparable based on previous elections. My job in the Treasury with Rachel Reeves is made all the more difficult because of the mess that we've been inheriting from the Conservatives in government, higher debt than ever before, high interest rates, public services on their knees, and a cost of living crisis that's affecting everybody across the country. We make no slight of the fact that that's going to be a really hard thing to do in terms of turning around the country, but we know the Conservatives can't clear up their own mess. We will be willing to do that, but then also to put in place our plans to bring forward a decade of national renewal in this country.
I believe you're putting pressure on Tory MPs with a motion to ban Truss-style budget meltdowns again in the future. How will you be doing that? And I ask you this because it's the very day that Liz Truss is, through her group, the Growth Commission, calling for pre-budget tax cuts, spend reforms to boost GDP ahead of the autumn statement.
Yeah, so Liz Truss is at it again, isn't she? She's calling for unfunded tax cuts that when she did it when she was Prime Minister caused the market to collapse. And you might remember that one of the problems at that time was that Liz Truss didn't let the Office for Budget Responsibility publish its independent assessment of the consequences of the political decisions that politicians
Something that Rishi Sunak has moved away from, yeah.
Sure, but what he can do this evening is vote with us in the Labour Party to give additional statutory powers to the Office of Budget Responsibility so that it has the independence to publish that independent assessment at any major fiscal event, irrespective of whether a politician says yes or no. We think the public deserve that transparency, and we think politicians would be better by having that check and balance in the system. So let's see if the Conservative Party votes with us this evening. It shouldn't be a controversial vote.
OK. Darren Jones, good talking to you. Darren's the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, speaking to us live there from Westminster. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Britain's Newsroom is coming up at 9:30. Your feet have barely touched the floor, have they, after such a busy day? Andrew and Bev in the studio.
It was an extraordinary day.
What a day. I've seen your article in the Mail this morning.
I was at a book launch last night for Nadine Dorris's book launch, and everyone was talking not about the sacking of Suella Braverman, which is exactly what they hoped, talking about the return of David Cameron, extraordinary. But we're going to be talking about the fallout from that, but also, what does Minister for Common Sense mean? Because that is the new job for Esther McVeigh.
Yeah.
Well,
I think so.
Horribly patronising, in my opinion. We've got Philip, Esther's husband. He's out there. We're going to be discussing it with him. I do think it is patronising.
She's a great woman, and she's clever, and she hates. She is, and she hates woke stuff.
She couldn't have said no.
No, she couldn't.
No.
I'm glad she's there. I want her there, but I do think she's better than that. I think to get rid of a strong woman like Suella Braverman and
to replace her effectively with David Cameron, who nobody has voted for. That's the big kicker for me. It's not. I mean, I'd quite like to be Minister for Education. Like, if the Prime Minister's watching, if you can just parachute people in now, if that's how our government works, I think we'd all be great. I could see.
But he's going to be a flair player, Beverly. He's going to be. I mean, if it was a football squad, he would be a flair player. Yeah.
What do you mean? What does that mean?
Flair. That means, you know, he's got star quality.
Fine, but you don't vote for footballers. We have a democratic process.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister hasn't been voted in by even his own party
but this is
members.
standard practice.
Yeah.
I mean, this has gone on and on and on in the Wilson government, the Heath government, you know, in the Thatcher government.
Well, Labour did it with Mandelson, of course, as you pointed out, and Adonis. Andrew Adonis was the Transport Secretary who brought HS2 on our shores.
I think it shows, Beverly, just the lack of quality there is there.
That's right.
And when you look at people who would say, I mean, if anybody asked me to be a politician, I would run a mile. I just would not. I could not deal with it. I couldn't deal with a party system. I couldn't deal with working with idiots around me. I couldn't. I just couldn't. It wouldn't be for me. Wouldn't be the career for me.
You say there's no good people. He kicked out Suella Braverman, and I think she is a good politician. And I think a lot of people out there
She was a good
believe in
politician.
her.
She'd still be in a job, Beverly.
I don't agree. Maybe
I think she served a purpose for him. You know, she was useful.
She was a
at
lightning
one point.
conductor.
She got him in as PM. Let's not make too much about that. And now she's no longer. She's more of a.
He'd also decided to get rid of her before the infamous article in the Times. That had already decided. So her time was up even before she wrote that article in the Times.
I think it's fascinating that secrets can still be kept.
That's
very
because
rare.
Rishi Sunak's
Purely
government
judging
leaks a
people
lot.
by your own standards. That's the trouble.
I've told you before, if I'm told it's a secret, I'll keep it secret. You can trust me with it.
Otherwise,
if you
you've
don't
gossip about
specify,
it.
otherwise it's fair game. I'm a journalist, I break the news.
None of us knew Cameron was coming, and none of us knew about Esther's job either.
No, I know. It's extraordinary.
Really?
Well, Esther must have known, presumably. She sat on our desk last week.
She didn't know then, I guarantee it. Guarantee it. I don't think she knew this time yesterday morning.
Well, Radio 4 this morning described her as the minister from GB News.
Well, there you go.
I was like, great, we've infiltrated the cabinet.
Yeah, I mean, they think that's an insult. But you've actually got GB News dictating what cabinet posts are being called.
Exactly.
The Minister from Common Sense. Esther is incredibly capable. I mean, her and I worked together on many, many programmes, GMTV. How do they do that on the BBC as well? And we drowned together in a studio. We fell off the roof of BBC TV Centre. We had such fun down through the years. But the thing is, like your good self, Beverly, who I've worked with, you guys are getting a chance to really express yourselves as opposed to being tied to a certain role as a presenter.
And, you know, I've always watched Esther when she's been presenting on GB News and also very much when she's been on our show, of how she does tread that line quite carefully.
Yes, she does.
She's very diplomatic. She manages to give you her opinion whilst also remaining faithful to the party message. And that's obviously resonated very much with Rishi Sunak, which is why he's got her up there. I'm glad she's at the table.
She's been an asset to him.
I just wish she had a different title.
I think you'll see her doing a lot of the broadcast rounds too, because
Which will be weird.
Yeah, exactly. She'll be down the line from Westminster College Green because she'll do it very well.
She will. Well, we've done them before.
The guy's coming up at 9:30. Britain's newsroom. OK. Still to come, we will air some of your views on the stories we've been covering and a birthday message to the King.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Well, it's someone's special day today, the ordinary person, King Charles. He turns 75.
And what better way to finish breakfast with our tribute to the King's life so far in pictures. We wish you very happy birthday, Your Majesty, from GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect